Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of What If Deku Was Born Without a Voice? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. When a child is born, it always enters the world with a cry. A silent baby often means death. Midoriya Izuku was born silently at 3:40 a.m. on July 15th. The doctors had no explanation as he was clearly crying, but silently. His face was red and scrunched from discomfort in entering a new world. He truly looked and acted like every other baby upon birth. Don't worry, Mrs. Midoriya, I'm sure he just needs a little more time to get the hang of using his vocal cords. Speech therapy can always help if this continues into childhood, the clearly exhausted doctor said. If that doesn't help, then this may be an effect of his quirk. We won't really know until it comes in. A kindly smiling nurse handed the new mother her baby, swaddled in a blanket far too large for the tiny child. He's a little cutie pie, I'm sure the ladies will love him when he's older. The tiny baby's face was barely visible through the vast expanses of the thick blanket. The small sliver that was visible showed off wispy green curls, the faint beginnings of eyebrows and a button nose. Inko laughed tiredly. Oh, don't even start. I don't want to think about him growing up yet. I want to enjoy just having my little boy for now. She held her little one closer and looked down into his face lovingly. Yeah, I just want to enjoy my time with my little boy. Mother and son stayed in the hospital for a little over a day and a half after the birth. They were released and brought home with the help of Bakugo Masaru, with Mitsuki and Katsuki supervising. Little Katsuki did a wonderful job of supervising. His wide red eyes watched everything in awe. Even though he was only a few months old, he seemed to already have mastered a scowl. As he didn't have full control over his facial muscles yet, his scowl appeared as a tiny pout. Inko, he looks like a mini-you. That's so effing cute. She just laughed at her friend's antics. Mitsuki, you'll need to watch your language. I don't need my little Izuku picking up your bad habits. I don't think Masaru will appreciate your little one toddling around screaming F-da. I got enough time. Don't worry about it, Inko. Mitsuki turned to the baby she was holding in her arms. Isn't that right, Katsuki? You'll be a perfect little angel. Just watch, Inko. Your little Izuku is gonna be the one tainting my son. Masaru sighed, but not from exasperation, from affection. For some reason I doubt that. Mitsuki, you're not really known for your good nature, or your patience, or your clean language, he teased lightly. Alright. I know, I'm no saint, but I'll tone down once the kiddos are old enough to actually comprehend their own existence. Once reaching the Midoriya residence, the three adults stepped inside, bringing the two babies by default. The two mothers, one newer than the other, took a seat while Masaru busied himself with making tea for them. The apartment was very simple in design. Everything was practical and had a purpose. The decorations present were mostly pictures of friends and family. Everything was clearly well worn with love, just a tad on the messy side. The home was clearly suited for a small and loving family, exactly what was there at the moment. So, the little sucker still hasn't made a sound? Inko shook her head. He hasn't, but I'm not particularly worried. Our best guess is that it has something to do with his quirk. No one in my family has a voice-related quirk, but who knows? I have no idea about Hisashi's family, she said. Thinking upon it, she realized that she had never even met her husband's family. Her own parents had passed years before, but not before they could meet their daughter's fiancé. When does the BSTRD get back from his business trip? 3 days? Yes, something like that. And I've said it before, Mitsuki, he doesn't like it when you call him a BSTRD. It was useless to try and get Mitsuki to stop, they all knew it. Inko only tried to keep up appearances, but she would never try to change her friend. Before you even start, there was no way he could have known that Izuku would come 3 weeks early. He was planning on being here for the birth. Masaru re-entered the room with a tray of tea and small snacks. He had long since figured out that his wife would settle down if given the proper amount of snacks each day, a fact he took advantage of liberally. Both women took their teacups with a small nod as thanks before returning to their conversation. You know me, I like him, but he can't know that. He took my best friend away from me. I need to assert my dominance. Inko gave her an amused, but eternally tired look. I think you did that when you were my first dance at my wedding reception. I have to keep reminding him, otherwise he'll grow complacent. Sweetheart, he would have to be brain dead to grow complacent around you. You're a terror, but a lovable one, Masaru told her as he kissed her temple and took the seat next to her. As he did, he took baby Katsuki from her arms. The conversation continued on into the afternoon, only pausing occasionally for snacks or diaper changes. Eventually, exhaustion took over the new mother, and she found herself barely able to keep her eyes open. Sorry Mitsuki Masaru, but I think I need to get to bed early. No need to apologize, sweetie. I was exhausted after Katsuki came out. You need your rest, Mitsuki said as she stood up. If you need anything, just call. We're right down the street, as you should know. With simple but sweet goodbyes, the friends split for the night. Inko carried her small son into the nursery that had been painted only 8 days ago. The walls were a soft, pastel blue with fluffy clouds of varying sizes and shapes decorating the walls. The ceiling was also blue, but a few shades deeper. Small stars of varying sizes and colors decorated the ceiling, creating small constellations that would glow in the dark. Izuku's crib was made from a light-colored wood. It was sturdy enough and large enough to last the small child for the first few years of life. Izuku found his favorite part of the nursery once his mother laid him down to sleep, a large teddy bear he could cuddle with as he slept. Good night, my little prince, Inko said softly as she turned off the lights and turned on a small night light. Once she was sure he was sleeping soundly, she headed to her own room to catch up on some much-needed sleep. While she absolutely adored Izuku, he was a bit of a kicker which often interrupted her sleep schedule. Now that he was out, she no longer had to worry about a tiny foot kicking into her ribs or her bladder at all hours of the day. Seeing as her tiny boy seemed unable to cry, she set a quiet alarm on her phone. The alarm would go off every 2 hours so she could check on her little one and make sure he was sleeping soundly. Once all of the alarms were set, she sunk into her bed and easily drifted off into a dreamless slumber. Izuku seemed to grow like a weed once he got home. He was still tiny as ever, but he was growing. As promised, Hisashi came home only a few days after Inko and Izuku were released from the hospital. Once he set eyes on his wife and newly born son, he couldn't help but cry. Look at you two. He looks just like us. He gently caressed Izuku's chubby cheek. Your colors, but my curls. Inko was already a very emotional woman. Adding a baby into the mixture only intensified things. Isn't he? He's absolutely perfect. I can't believe we made him. Izuku, as all newborn babies, couldn't care less about what his parents were saying. At the moment, he was particularly interested in the strands of Inko's hair that was falling towards his face. He slowly reached up one of his hands and tried to grab at them, but he wasn't quite coordinated or strong enough to accomplish the task. All he managed to do was lightly swat at the air between himself and his mother. I hope he ends up looking more like you. He'll have all of the ladies swarming after him then. What a little charmer, Hisashi said with a soft smile. All Inko could do was huff in good nature. Oh shush, he's a baby. What is it with people trying to make my little boy into a charmer? She looked down at her tiny son who was still trying and failing to grab her hair. The only people he'll be charming right now are adults. As the days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months, Izuku remained adorable, but silent. He met every milestone that every other child did. He crawled, then stumbled, then walked. He remained silent and it seemed that he always would. Okay, how do I do this again? Inko asked herself softly as Izuku sat on her lap, watching with wide eyes. Hi Izuku, Inko spoke softly and signed at the same time. Inko and Hisashi both began to take signing lessons once the doctors confirmed that Izuku wouldn't be talking anytime soon. You hungry? You thirsty? Izuku looked between his mother's hands and his own. Yes, hungry, no thirsty. Yes. Good boy Izuku. You did such a good job. She hugged him close and peppered his face in kisses. His face brightened with a small and a silent giggle. Let's get you a snack. Want yogurt? Want pears? Pears, he signed to his mother. Inko set him into his high chair and set about getting a soft pear cut up into small enough slices for him. She placed the small cut of pears in front of him. Thank you. You're welcome. Enjoy, my little prince. I'll make myself a snack while you eat. She lightly kissed his forehead and began to get her own snack, mostly consisting of small sweets and fragrant tea. Once everything was ready, she took a seat next to her son and happily ate. Daddy should be home soon. Are you excited? She knew he couldn't understand her fully, but it was nice to pretend. Life as a stay-at-home mom was a tad on the lonely side, even though she often had playdates with Mitsuki and little Katsuki. Izuku seemed far too invested in his pears to even bother giving a response to his mother if he even understood her. At the moment, nothing in the universe would come between the small boy and his pieces of pear. He didn't even look up when Inko's camera flashed and clicked, maybe a little on the obnoxious side. The front door opened with a small squeak. Inko? Izuku? I'm home. Hisashi walked further into the house after taking off his shoes and jacket. Work was so busy today, you wouldn't believe it. He kissed both of them on the forehead and set his bag down. Oh yeah? The two of us were pretty busy as well. We read one of my books together, went to the park, and practiced some signing, Inko said as she sipped her tea. He's really getting the hang of signing. He's a little chatterbox. Really? That's great, he said with a soft smile. It wasn't as bright or as genuine as normal. If anything, it seemed a bit distant. Neither son nor mother took notice. The Bakugas are learning sign as well, aren't they? Inko laughed light. They are. They say Katsuki is picking it up really well. Masaru is a bit on the grumpy side because Mitsuki learned some swears for fun and well. Katsuki saw her signing F-, and now he won't stop. Hisashi snorted. Yeah, that seems like something Mitsuki would do. I'm not surprised in the slightest. While he was with his family physically, it was easy to tell that he wasn't fully there mentally. He seemed exhausted in every regard. Inko took notice. How about you relax on the couch and watch something? I'll get started on dinner. Thank you, sweetheart, he said as he stood. I can take Izuku with me if you like, that way you don't have to split your attention. No, I'll be fine. Besides, he's still working on his pear. Glancing over at little Izuku revealed that she was right. Izuku was still oblivious to the world, munching happily on his pieces of pear. Well, right. I feel like taking him away would be near impossible with how passionate he is about his snack right now. If you do need anything, just call. All right. I will. Now go lay down and watch one of your shows. You haven't had much downtime, enjoy it, she said as she started to prep everything for dinner. As Hisashi laid on the couch to watch his show, Inko busied herself with making dinner. It wasn't long before the scent of whatever she was cooking wafted into the rest of the house. There was one truth in the universe, it was that Inko was the best home cook and baker. She was easily able to multitask in the kitchen due to her quirk, which allowed her to grab any ingredient she needed without much thought or focus. The way she moved about the kitchen was almost a dance. Despite promising to relax, Hisashi silently stood and watched his wife from the doorway. A small smile graced his lips as he watched her dance about, adding green onion and bok choy to her pot. Before long, she was finished. She turned to call to her husband but found him already in the doorway. Well, take a seat. Dinner's ready. She served up a bowl for herself and Hisashi while Hisashi grabbed the necessary dining ware. Once everyone was seated and Izuku was given his own dinner to work through, the young couple began to. Now, I know you mentioned work being busy, but you seem more stressed than just a busy day. What's wrong, sweetheart? He ate a few more bites before sighing and setting down his chopsticks. The higher-ups want to give me a promotion. Really? Isn't that a good thing? It is. I'd be getting a raise, a significant raise. It's just, we would have to move, he looked up at his wife. Move? She asked curiously, where would we have to move? Over a prefecture or two. That's the thing, he paused for a second before continuing. We would have to move to America. Moving countries was hard, but it was nothing compared to breaking the news to Mitsuki Bakugo. Despite having broken the news weeks ago, She was still throwing a fit until the day of. I can't believe you're moving away from me. Mitsuki. I'm sorry, but it's too good of an opportunity for us to pass up. Hisashi's bosses said that if everything goes well, we'll be back in Japan in 4 years, Inko said placatingly. I know it'll be hard, but we can video chat and visit. I'll do everything in my power to make sure that Izuku knows Katsuki. They'll be best friends just like we always promised. I don't like it, Mitsuki said. I feel like your BSTRD did this on purpose to keep us apart. It wouldn't be the first time he's stolen you away from me. Mitsuki was the definition of displeased. Her forehead was creased into a frown, her mouth was pouty, and her arms were crossed. Mitsuki, the last time he stole me away was for our honeymoon. He had no right to take you away for 2 weeks. I needed you, she said. I'm sorry, but this is best for my family. I'll visit you when I can. Hell, you and Masaru can use this as an excuse to go to New York Fashion Week. I know you've always wanted to attend, Inko said as she began to empty out the kitchen cabinets. Are you sure it's okay for us to store these at your house? Mitsuki sighed softly. Of course. I don't like that you're leaving, but I won't make you pay for storage. We have a big house. We don't need all of the space. Besides, this will ensure you returning to my loving arms. Inko laughed softly. Of course, thank you. Once she finished filling her box with dishes, she taped it shut and placed a label on it. I'm moving to America, not dying, Mitsuki. I'll be fine. Yeah. If you die, I'll kill you. You hear me? I'll kill you. Mitsuki managed to stop pouting so she could help her friend with the higher shelves. While attraction of small objects was useful, it was only safe to use when Inko could see her target. Hey Inko, Masaru appeared in the doorway. The dresser from your bedroom. Was that included in apartment? Or did you and Hisashi buy it? Oh, we bought it. We have a buyer coming to pick it up later tonight. Could you bring it outside? I already took all of my clothes out. Of course, I'll bring it out once Hisashi gets back from loading the truck. Masaru disappeared from the doorway, presumably to wait for Hisashi. I know you'll be fine, Inko, Mitsuki said, pulling the conversation back into focus. I'm just worried about you. What are you gonna do without me? I'm your extrovert. I'll get by perfectly fine. I'm sure I'll make friends when I take Izuku to the park. You better. Make sure those other brats don't make fun of Izuku for being mute. He's an old soul, he'll take it to heart. Inko looked over at her son who had his foot in his mouth, listening to Katsuki babble. Ah yes, an old soul. I forgot that all wise men sek on their feet daily. Mitsuki snorted. Oh, stop that. You know what I mean. He's your son, he'll be an over-emotional little cutie pie that's too smart for his own good. Inko hummed in agreement. You got me there. The apartment was already mostly empty at this point. The largest pieces of furniture had already been sold and taken away. All that remained were some smaller pieces that would be taken care of the day the Midoriyas left. The apartment that was once a home was reduced to bare bones. You're going to video chat me weekly, okay? I need to teach my darling nephew my ways. If your ways include showing him how to sign FUCK, then I don't know if I will, Inko teased. But don't worry, I'll video chat with you once a week for at least an hour. We can get the boys to practice signing with each other. I'll accept an hour, nothing less, Mitsuki said as she held out her pinky. Promise you'll give me at least an hour? I promise, Inko said and locked her pinky with Mitsuki's. It's the least I can do for my oldest friend. Don't say it like that. I'm not old. You seem to forget that I'm older than you, Inko gave her friend a dry look. Calling you old is calling myself old, but I don't have any qualms about admitting my age. The two continued to bicker as they finished packing up the kitchen. Most of the dishes and small appliances would be kept and stored as many were from Inko's parents. Everything that would be stored at the Bakugus was placed in the truck and driven over. As the last few boxes were unloaded, a sense of foreboding and finality settled over the two small families. So, I suppose we won't see you for a while then, Masaru trailed off. Nothing more had to be said. Both small families knew that this would be the last time they saw each other in person for a while. Inko teared up and pulled her two best friends into a tight hug. I'll miss you all so much. I promise to keep in contact. Goodbyes were exchanged, all heartfelt, but the saddest seemed to be pulling the two babies apart. Mitsuki, unable to hold back her tears any longer, made her way home with Katsuki. As they left, Masaru helped Inko and Hisashi load up his car with their luggage and baby Izuku. Despite normally being calm and collected, Masaru was beginning to regret agreeing to drive them to the airport. The drive, despite only being a few minutes at most, felt like an eternity. Upon arriving, the adults silently unpacked and made their way inside. Take care of Mitsuki for me, okay, Masaru? Inko pleaded, teary-eyed. He smiled softly. You already know I will. Have a safe flight, you three. With those promises exchanged, the Midoriya family made their way through the vast airport toward their gate. Inko felt an aura of finality settle about her as she boarded the plane. She knew that she would not be returning to Japan. Arriving in America was an overwhelming experience. They landed in the John F. Kennedy International Airport, an airport named after some political figure from hundreds of years ago, but has since been forgotten. Immediately, the Midoriyas could see the differences from Japan. Quirks were openly used and flaunted. People of every race and creed milled about the airport, only a small snapshot of what was to come once they left the confines of the vast building. Do you know which way to go? Hisashi nodded. Yeah, I remember the general layout from my business trip last year. Follow me, I ordered a car to pick us up. He took his wife's carry-on and led the way. Upon reaching the desired exit, they loaded their luggage into the waiting car. The drive to their new apartment was silent, but comfortably so. Izuku was fast asleep, and both of his parents wished they were able to join him. The apartment should be fully furnished, Hisashi said through a yawn. We should be able to just go to sleep without much work. Inko nodded silently, exhaustion racking her small frame. Upon pulling up to the building, Hisashi silently unloaded the car with the help of the driver. Inko climbed out with Izuku held carefully in her arms. Opening the door to their new home revealed that, as promised, everything was fully furnished and cleaned. Before exploring further, Inko set Izuku into his crib, tucking him in for the night. Seeing as he spent most of his day sleeping, he shouldn't have much trouble adjusting to the new time zone. Come on, sweetheart, Hisashi kept his voice low. Let's get to bed. He gently guided her to their bedroom. It was spacious and filled with a large king-size bed. The couple silently changed and slid into bed, falling asleep as soon as their heads hit their pillows. The door closed with extra force, the afternoon sun filtering in through the open windows. Hisashi appeared haggard, just as he normally did after work. I'm home, Inko. Izuku. Stepping in further, he found his wife asleep on the couch with Izuku, now a toddler, playing with blocks on the carpet. Upon hearing his dad enter, Izuku looked up and smiled brightly, waving his hands in messy sign. Hi, Daddy. Hi, baby boy, he said as he picked up his son. He was small for his age, but healthy, nonetheless. He still hadn't spoken a single word, so it was assumed by everyone that he would never speak. Hisashi and his wife hoped that Izuku's quirk would be able to compensate for his lack of speech. While many people knew variations of sign language due to various restrictions caused by quirks, there were still many that never bothered, which made it difficult for Izuku. With Izuku turning 4 in a couple months, it was growing close to time for him to start attending preschool. With every day that passed, the Midoriyas grew more impatient as Izuku's quirk didn't appear. Inko's quirk appeared when she was 4, Hisashi's when he was both were certain his would appear any day now if his parents' development were anything to go off of. No matter what they did, no smoke appeared, and no flowers floated. There was consideration for a moment that he had an intelligence-based quirk, but that was quickly disproved by the doctor at his yearly appointment. Daddy. Hisashi jolted. Did you say something, Aizu? I said Daddy. Izuku remained in Hisashi's arms, unaware of how excited his parents were about to be. Ainko. Wake up. Izuku has a quirk. Just like any mother being woken up from a nap, Inko jolted awake with a gasp. What? Hisashi kneeled next to the couch with Izuku in his arms. Izuku has a quirk. He couldn't contain or conceal his excited smile. Oh, how does it work? How does it work? Izuku held out his hand to his mother's cheek. Hi, Mommy. Over emotional as always, Inko's eyes teared up. Hi there, baby. With his quirk appearing, the parents quickly scheduled Izuku to have an appointment with a quirk counselor. Neither parent knew the extent of his power, just that they could hear his voice in their minds when he touched them. The appointment with the quirk counselor couldn't come fast enough. All right, Izuku, thank you for being so patient and well-behaved. The counselor sat back in his chair. I believe I have a good idea of what his quirk is. It's activated through physical contact with someone. Once he has contact with someone, he is able to speak into their mind, and he is able to hear their current stream of thought. Wait, current stream of thought? Are you saying he can read minds? Hisashi was understandably shocked. The counselor thought for a second before nodding. Yes, that's an easy way to explain it. From the few tests I ran with your son, it's clear it only works when he has directly contact with someone. He's very good at projecting his own thoughts, but his ability to hear another's thoughts is still iffy. As he grows accustomed to it, he should gain better control. Once he has better control, we can figure out the exact limits of his quirk. As it stands currently, it's already very powerful and rare. Wow, Inko let out a breath. At least we won't have to worry about him not being able to talk to people. Hisashi nodded with a soft laugh. Yeah, I can't believe this. I can't say I expected this at all. Whilst the adults discussed his quirk and its implications, Izuku enjoyed a lollipop. While getting his quirk was exciting, he had many more important things on his mind. Specifically, whether or not he would be able to convince his parents to stop for ice cream on the way back. All right then, I'll see you in a couple weeks then for the follow-up appointment. The counselor smiled and stood up. Until then, make sure you practice, all right, Izuku? Izuku pulled his attention away from his candy long enough to nod. The counselor simply chuckled and handed a few more lollipops to Inko. All right then, I'll see you all again soon. My assistant will show you the way out. Once the small family was buckled up in the car, the two parents turned towards their son. All right, Izuku, Hisashi said. How about ice cream to celebrate? Izuku nodded with enthusiasm, barely able to contain the excitement within his small body. His father smiled softly. All right, to the ice cream shop then. He pulled the car out of the parking lot and onto the street, away from the small clinic. Driving to the ice cream parlor was filled with pop music from the top 100 charts and questionable commentary by radio hosts. It wasn't a long drive, no more than 7 minutes at most. It was almost a mockingly small amount of time. There it is, it doesn't look like they're busy, Inko said to Hisashi. After this we should. She never got to finish her sentence. Looking back at this moment in his life, Izuku wouldn't remember the broken glass showering over him like rain. He wouldn't remember the sound of his father's screams juxtaposed by how silent his mother was. He wouldn't remember the intense fear and pain that ripped through his body. All he would remember is the aura of being lost settling over him. Red and blue lights flashed as police, ambulances, and a fire truck drove onto the scene. Their sirens were blaring and people were screaming, but to Izuku, it seemed as if his head was underwater. A police officer ran over to his crushed car, the car that was dwarfed by the truck that was lodged in the passenger side of the front seat, right where his mother was supposed to be. Hey there, buddy, can you hear me? The police officer was trying to stay calm for the sake of the child. Don't move at all, okay? Stay as still as you can. Unable to speak and being told not to move, Izuku was left only being able to look at the officer with wide eyes. The officer waited for a reply. With none being said, he turned away. I need a paramedic over here now. Paramedics and firemen alike ran over, careful of the broken glass and shredded metal. All right, buddy, we're going to get you out as carefully as possible, okay? Getting him out would be no easy feat. The car frame was warped by the truck despite having hit the front of the passenger side, nowhere near Izuku's seat in the back. There's no way we'll be able to open this door. Our best bet is to go around to the other side and slide him out with his booster seat, the officer said. The paramedics went around to the other side of the car, which was almost disturbingly untouched. The door was opened easily with a faint click that was lost amidst the sounds of the surrounding chaos. Keep your eyes on me, all right, buddy? We're going to do our best to get you out safe and sound. Take some nice deep breaths for me, okay? The small boy barely even noticed himself be lifted out of the car. All he could focus on was the feeling of warm blood slowly drip down his face and the fact that his father hadn't stopped screaming despite already being taken out of the car. You're doing great. We're going to be taking you and your daddy to the hospital, okay, bud? He didn't say anything about Izuku's mommy. Izuku didn't understand what death was yet, but he knew she wouldn't be coming back. Hisashi still hadn't stopped screaming. Looking over at his daddy, the only thing visibly wrong with Hisashi was a few cuts on his face from broken glass and some bruising from the airbag. His right arm was slightly swollen, it was at least sprained, but more likely broken. Izuku couldn't quite tell what was wrong with himself. He could feel the blood dripping down his face, but he didn't know where the cuts were. He felt numb, but he felt everything at the same time. The lights were still flashing, reflecting off of the spider cracks in the glass. It was almost beautiful. Looking at the truck still lodged in the side of the car was disgusting. The truck was mockingly intact and pristine. The front window had small cracks and the airbags had deployed, but it looked as if it could easily drive away. I didn't see the red light. I swear. I'm a great driver. I've never been in an accident before. I've never even gotten a ticket before. Give me a break, it's been a rough day. The voice of the driver flicked in and out of Izuku's ears. A rough day is getting caught speeding or blowing a tire. A rough day isn't plowing through an obvious red light and hitting a small family, sir. Have you been drinking? Izuku looked away just as an officer brought out a small handheld device and held it up the offender's lips. Whatever value it registered caused a swell of outrage amongst the surrounding officers and paramedics. Irresponsible. Twice the legal limit. I don't even like alcohol. I would never drink. Inko Midoriya, dead upon arrival, time of death, 4:37. The sun is, can't talk, scans needed. Words passed through Izuku's head, filtering in through the chaos that his mind was feeling. Daddy stopped screaming. The team of paramedics carefully took him out of the car seat and strapped him to the gurney once they were sure he was stable. As he was lifted into the ambulance, he looked over at the car one last time. The door where his mommy had been sitting was bent all out of shape. As he looked, he could see her purse had been thrown from the car. The contents had spilled out across the road. The lollipops that the counselor had given him just minutes earlier were crushed, the reds and greens and purples being pressed into the black asphalt. The doors of the ambulance closed. Izuku couldn't see the car, the lollipops, or his daddy anymore. All he could see were the kind, but worried faces of the paramedics. One reached out and gently began to feel his head, looking for any open wounds. "Where's my daddy?" The paramedic jumped, eyes widening even more. The paramedic's yellow irises glowed faintly, contrasted by the rest of his eyes which were an inky black. "Your daddy?" "He's being brought to the hospital in the other ambulance." "Don't worry, little guy, you'll see him soon," he smiled kindly. "Can you tell me your name?" "Izuku. Mommy and Daddy call me Aizu." The paramedic nodded as they continued to check over his head. "Okay, Aizu, thank you. Izuku is a really cool name. Where are you from?" Once he finished examining his head, he moved on to his neck and abdomen. "I dunno." Izuku flinched slightly from the feeling of a cold stethoscope pressing against his chest. An apology was softly murmured. "Can you talk, Aizu?" The paramedic paid no mind to the other paramedics staring at him as if he were crazy, seeming to have a one-sided conversation. "I can't make noise. I use my hands." He looked down at his arms. One had an all-too-large blood pressure cuff on it. "You know sign language?" "Perfect. Do you know what kind it is?" "Mommy and Daddy and me use Neon Shua. Daddy's been teaching me American Sign." The kind paramedic nodded. "Okay, thank you." He turned to the others. "His name is Izuku Midoriya. He can't talk, but he knows sign language. He knows something called Neon Shua and SL." The ambulance jolted roughly over the uneven road, causing everyone to pause briefly until they were no longer being thrown about. "Neon? Isn't that the name for Japan?" "With a name like Izuku Midoriya, I'd guess he's Japanese," a paramedic with bright pink hair replied. "Also, how are you talking to him right now?" Oh, his quirk is something. Like mind reading. He touched me and then I could hear him. It's weird, but it makes it easy to talk to him considering he can't move to sign right now. The paramedic nodded. Alright, keep talking to him. Could you get his age? He looks really small, but if he was able to tell you that much, he may be older than he looks. Alright Aizu, can you tell me? Mommy says I'll be 4 soon. You're almost 4? Wow, you're a smart little guy. He glanced out the window. Alright Aizu, we're pulling up to the hospital now. Once we get inside, we'll fix you up as best as we can. I'll tell the nurses and doctors that you can talk by touching, okay? Where's Mommy? The kind paramedic flinched, which didn't make sense to the small boy. I'm not sure, buddy. I'm sure someone will be able to give you an answer at the hospital. That's a lie. Izuku wasn't sure how he knew, but he did. He knew that was a lie. What the exact lie was beyond him. Here we are Aizu, he said as the ambulance parked. The back doors were thrown open and Izuku was lifted out carefully. The paramedics steered his gurney into the ER where doctors, nurses, and patients were milling about. It was chaotic, but somehow controlled. A doctor dressed in smart blue scrubs walked up to the group, slowly looking over the small boy as he did. Hey there little guy, can you tell me where it hurts? A group of nurses were right behind him, all poised to take over the care of the small boy from the paramedics. Hurts? Ah, Dr. Jeffries, this is Izuku Midoriya. He can't talk. If you touch him, he can speak directly into your mind. Pain? Is he supposed to feel something? Dr. Jeffries nodded before lightly touching Izuku's shoulder. So, young man, where does it hurt? Nothing hurts. The doctor didn't want him to notice, but he glanced down at the small boy's leg which was left exposed by shorts. Izuku followed his gaze. As soon as his eyes saw his leg, a tidal wave of pain crashed over his small body. The skin was swollen to twice its normal size. Bruises marred the normally pale skin. It almost looked like a pain palette with the various shades. There were cuts decorating everything that wasn't bruised. Oh, it hurts. Without a word, the doctor and nurses took him to a small room. Scans, examinations, and observations. A nurse complained softly about having to run up to pediatrics to grab 4 kits. Another commented on how there was extra space to set their supplies because Izuku only took up a small fraction of the bed. Pain meds soon followed, but the pain never fully left. Izuku couldn't feel the burning fires that existed in his leg or any of his other numerous injuries, yet he still felt a suffocating sort of pain, one that wasn't physical. When can I see my mommy and daddy? IVs were put in. His clothes were cut off and replaced with 2 big scrubs. They took away his favorite shirt. It was ripped and bloody. Where's Mommy? Some nurse gave him a stuffed bunny. The bunny was soft, but an artificial kind of softness. Running his hand along its sides felt soothing. Where's Daddy? The door to his room opened. Isashi was in a wheelchair. He had butterfly bandages on his forehead and cheek holding large but not too large gashes together. Bandages covered his hands, most likely cut by the glass. His arm was already in a cast. Hey there Aizu, his dad said with a wobbly smile. The nurse pushed his chair up close enough so they could touch. You're in rough shape my little man. Daddy didn't run his fingers through Izuku's hair like he always did. He said that his hair was a perfect mixture of Mommy's color and Daddy's curls. Daddy, where's Mommy? His smile slowly fell. Emotions crossed his face that Izuku's 3, almost 4-year-old vocabulary couldn't even hope to describe. He wasn't quite mad, but he was more than sad. Mommy is gone Izuku. Izuku didn't know what death was, but he knew that gone meant she wasn't coming back. Anyway Aizu, it looks like they're getting ready to give you a cast for your leg. Do you want it to be red? Red was Izuku's favorite color. Always has been and always will be. His dad accepted his silence as yes. Hello Mr. Midoriya. Dr. Jeffries entered the room. Izuku wasn't sure when he left. Izuku has been a wonderful little patient. I just want to go over his injuries with you. The largest injury was his right leg. The break was clean, so a cast will be fine. Besides that, he has a minor concussion which shouldn't take too long to heal as long as he rests and avoids bright light. He has some cuts and scrapes, 2 required stitches. Overall, he should be fine in a month or so. The quirks of our staff definitely help with the recovery process. Dr. Jeffries smiled at the son and the father, but it seemed empty. Dr. Jeffries knew that Mommy was gone but didn't tell him. Thank you, doctor. I think I would like some time along with my son if that's all right. Hisashi swallowed thickly. Could I get a laptop or a tablet of some sort? I need to make a call. Izuku loved tablets, always has. The games on his mommy's tablet were fun, but he preferred being able to talk with Auntie Mitsuki and Kaken. They were always really funny to talk to. Auntie always talked to Mommy about gossip, greatly embellishing all of her stories. While those two talked, Kaken and Izuku got to practice their sign together. Hey Izuku, wanna see something I learned? Kaken was a bit older than Izuku and therefore knew a lot more than he did. Izuku nodded excitedly. Is it a new sign? My mommy used it a couple days ago. My daddy doesn't like it when I use it, but I think it's funny. Mitsuki and Inko took no notice of the 2 small boys, too engrossed with whether Mr. Sano was sleeping with Ms. Hattori, who Mitsuki described as a floozy, whatever that meant. Katsuki showed Izuku the new sign, but he wasn't able to properly explain what it meant given his limited vocabulary in sign. You could try saying it? Maybe my mommy has said it before? He nodded eagerly and sat up straighter than he ever has before. Mitsuki. Bakugu. I thought you said you would watch your language once the kids were, and I quote, old enough to comprehend their own existence. Inko's voice was sharp, but her smile was amused. Izuku honey, don't bother remembering that work. Katsuki, don't use that work anymore. Using that word is illegal if you're under the age of 16. Katsuki's eyes widened. Illegal? Mommy, why would you let me use that word? I don't want to go to jail. For some reason, Auntie Mitsuki looked vaguely constipated. Her face was red, and it looked like she was crying. I guess I forgot Katsuki, she sounded out of breath. I never swore when I was your age, so I never had to worry about breaking the law. Auntie Mitsuki was laughing. Izuku didn't know why she would be laughing. Committing a crime is no joke, but she was definitely laughing. Daddy connected a call with Auntie Mitsuki on the tablet the doctor gave him. Auntie Mitsuki wasn't laughing this time. All of the Bakugas were huddled into the screen. Mitsuki was wearing a robe and holding a steaming cup of coffee. Masaru was already dressed for the day, but he wore an apron over his clothes. He must have been in the middle of making breakfast when Hisashi called. Little Katsuki was half asleep in his mother's lap, wrapped in a blanket that Inko had bought for him. Daddy started talking. Auntie Mitsuki started crying. Uncle Masaru just stared into the distance. Kaken didn't know what was happening. All he could do was turn in his mother's lap and hug her. He had never seen her cry before. Izuku and Hisashi flew back to Japan for the funeral. Hisashi made all necessary arrangements for his wife's body to be treated while still in the hospital. As soon as Izuku was released on a tentative note of good health, the two were loaded onto a plane with the coffin. This was Izuku's first time on a flight that he could remember, but he wasn't able to enjoy a single second of it. Instead of staring at the pillowy clouds and telling his parents what they vaguely looked like, he sat silently in his chair, fiddling with the seatbelt. The flight attendants complimented him on how well-behaved he was. Landing was scary for the small boy. The only outward sign of his fear was how he clutched his father's hand. His hand slipped from Hisashi's quickly, almost as if her were burned upon seeing his thoughts. Come on Izuku. Time to go. As always, Izuku followed his father silently. Not a single second was wasted. The father and son went directly to the Bakuga's house, where the wake would be held. The house was neat and tidy with an open space for the altar and casket to be placed. Not long after the casket was placed and arranged, the guests began to arrive. A small stream of mourners in black suits, dresses, and kimonos entered, filling the small home. I'm so sorry for your loss. A kuden yukuro was placed into a hand. She was a lovely woman, I'll miss seeing her smile. A sad smile was exchanged. Your mommy loved you dearly, little one, make sure to remember that. A child's hair was gently ruffled. Masaru greeted everyone at the door. The guests aimed for Hisashi but were intercepted by Mitsuki. Hisashi doesn't want to talk to anyone, Mitsuki said softly. You being here is enough. He understands you give your condolences. I'll make sure he gets the gifts. Izuku and Katsuki stood to the side wearing matching suits, their pinkies locked together. Katsuki spoke for Izuku in more ways than one. Neither Izuku nor Katsuki were able to pay attention to the Buddhist priest that arrived for the short ceremony. The two of them just stared off into the distance with the chanting of the priest acting as an indistinguishable drone in the background. Neither boy moved as incense was wafted about the room. The two stayed secluded in their own little world, a world of confusion and tentative mourning. No guess. I can't stand the shallow platitudes and fake grief. Hisashi, others are allowed to mourn her passing, Mitsuki said softly over tea the next morning. It'll just be us when she's finally laid to rest. The funeral won't be too long, I promise. I don't care about others. She wasn't their wife. They aren't allowed to feel grief over her passing, they only knew her superficially. The funeral ceremony didn't last long. Against Hisashi's wishes, other guests were present. By the end, pale flowers covered every inch of the casket, both inside and out. Hisashi placed a small bouquet of carnations into Inko's hands. Mitsuki created a halo of lilies that surrounded Inko's face. Lilies had always been her favorite despite their connection to death. The guests left silently, simply bowing their heads to the Bakugis and remaining Midoriyas. Once only the two small families remained, Inko's casket was nailed shut. All right, Izuku, come here. Mitsuki carefully held chopsticks in her hands. You and I are going to put mommy into the urn, okay? Just pick up one bone at a time and carefully place it in the bottom. Think you can do that? Izuku nodded and took the chopsticks. He clumsily began to package the bones away with the help of Auntie Mitsuki. Sifting through the ash to find all of the bones took time, and Hisashi was already short from the pomp and circumstance of the wake and funeral. He had never really been a man for tradition, but it seemed that he couldn't put away his distaste for such events even for his late wife. Good job, kiddo, that was the last one. Mitsuki placed a light kiss on Izuku's forehead before closing the urn. You did a great job, I know your mommy would be proud. Masaru gathered the urn into his arms while Mitsuki took one of Izuku's and Katsuki's hands. Hisashi followed silently behind, his already sour mood worsening. The drive to the grave was tense, no one dared to break the toxic calm. Mitsuki had hoped that finally laying Inko to rest in her family's grave would break the tension. It did not. When are you two moving back? Mitsuki asked, her voice thick and wavering. The breath caught every other word or so, and she tried to hold back more tears. We're not. We're going back to America tomorrow. We won't be coming back to Japan in the foreseeable future. She turned to Hisashi abruptly, as if only just now seeing him. What? You can't be serious, Hisashi. Please. I see no reason to uproot my life with Izuku just to go back to Japan where I don't have a guaranteed job. My job pays well. I'm doing what's best for him. Are you? There was no bite to her words, just exhaustion. He needs his best friend. He needs Masaru and I. You can work and grieve. We can help take care of him. Are you suggesting that I can't take care of my own son? Hisashi's eyes flashed with anger. We are going back to America. Nothing you say will change my mind. I kept you in my life because Inko loved you. Now that she's gone, I see no reason to keep pretending that I need you, much less like you. Hisashi, you can't be serious. You can't cut us off just because I can and will. It's what's best for me and my son. Smoke curled from his lips, small flames danced within his mouth. Just stop. Izuku can still video chat with you all, but I'm done. I've never liked you. Just be happy you'll get to talk to him. The woman that was usually filled with ire and fire clenched her fists tightly, trembling from barely repressed anger. She took a slow and shaky breath before hanging her head in defeat, silently accepting Hisashi's decision. Hisashi gently lifted Izuku into his arms and walked out of the cemetery, leaving the Bakugis to mourn his wife. Izuku sat crouched on the edge of the roof, looking out over the city. His hair fell in messy white curls to his shoulders, his eyes barely visible. He loved and hated the city that never sleeps for everything it was. It wasn't home, but it was the closest thing that he knew even if it was a complete concrete jungle. "Konahito, you know what I've said about sitting that close to the edge?" A black woman with braided golden hair sat next to him. "You've been sitting out here for a while, dinner's ready?" She lightly placed her hand on his shoulder. "I know, Tony. I just like it out here." He leaned against her. Despite many years passing, he was still a small boy. "Hey now, don't get comfy. I just said dinner is ready," she laughed softly. "If you didn't want me to get comfy, then why did you sit next to me?" She huffed in amusement. "Always a little Einstein, aren't you? Don't sass me, Izuku Midoriya." He smiled cheekily. "I learned it from the best, Antonella Ramirez." Izuku followed Antonella into her apartment. It was warm and well-loved, unlike his own apartment that was down the hall. She had beads hanging from most door frames instead of real doors. She said it fit her vibe better, whatever that meant. Izuku had found the beads cool when he was younger, but now, they were simply a hazard as he often lost focus and got tangled in them. Tony tried to pretend to be sympathetic each time it happened, but her facade was always ruined by her barely contained laughter. Izuku batted the beads to the kitchen out of the way as he entered, simply to make a point. True to her word, dinner was ready on the table, a large pot of mole de alia, her father's recipe. She served a generous bowl for herself and Izuku, getting them each a glass of sweet lemonade once she finished. "Thank you." Tony took her seat next to Izuku and gave him a smile. "Eat up, we're going out once you finish. I have a couple more tests I want to run with your quirk." "Sound good?" Izuku nodded eagerly. He hadn't been back to a quirk counselor since the day of the accident. His father hardly paid attention to him when he was home, so he was mostly left to explore the reaches of his quirk with his babysitter, Antonella. She was nothing like his mother, but just like her at the same time. On the days when Tony didn't have to look after Izuku, which were few and far between, she assisted her parents at their quirk analysis clinic. Quirk counselors often referred those with new and never-seen-before quirks to the clinic so they could safely test the limits. With her family's profession, it was easy to see why Izuku loved her parents. Izuku had always loved analyzing quirks, breaking them down to their most basic components until he understood exactly how they functioned. Despite only being 9, he was quite adept. Tony's parents always gushed about how talented and full of ideas he was. They only exaggerated a tiny bit for the small boy. The small boy quickly slurped up his soup, too excited to practice his quirk to care about the stomachache he would most likely end up with. Done. He set his bowl gently back onto the table. He had already been told off numerous times for slamming glass and bowls down. Tony slowly raised an eyebrow and looked down at her bowl, which was just under halfway full. "You may be done, but I'm not. Considering you're so speedy, you can get started on washing the dishes. I should be done by the time you finish." Izuku slumped and threw his head back, pulling himself out of his chair and dragging his feet towards the sink, his silent version of whining. The small boy stepped up onto the footstool that was a permanent fixture in Tony's kitchen, specifically for his use. Despite putting up a show of displeasure, he started on the dishes, taking care to make sure every piece was perfectly clean before setting them in the drying rack. As Tony said, she was finished by the time he finished up the dishes. "All right, Konahito, let's go," she said as she shouldered her bag. In response, Izuku scrambled to push his footstool out of the way, another thing he was told off for numerous times. Once it was no longer under threat of being tripped on, the pair set off. The hallway leading to Tony's and Hisashi's apartment had floors that creaked, not with age, but with poor care and low quality. There were spots here and there that Izuku had made a game of jumping over, as there were many uneven spots caused by necessary repairs. The staircase down from their floor seemed to stretch into infinity, at least from Izuku's perspective. He slid his hand along the slightly splintered and definitely dirty hand railings. "All right, Squirt, off we go." She swung his arm wildly as she led the way, making the small boy laugh silently. As she swung their arms, her bag bumped into both of them, but neither cared. It wasn't long before they came to a small building. It was brick and well cared for but worn with age. A small sign in the front indicated that it was Ramirez's Quirk Analysis Clinic. The door creaked softly as Tony unlocked the door, walking with ease through the mostly dark building. "Here we are," she said as she flipped on a light for a small gym that they had just entered. I want to see what kind of range works with your quirk. Range? I have to be touching someone. Maybe, maybe not. There may be a qualifier that you haven't thought of before. Like, my friend Rosa, for her entire childhood, she thought that her quirk required her to drink water. We recently figured out that her quirk isn't triggered by drinking water, it's triggered by getting her teeth wet. How didn't she notice the true trigger? Well, when you drink, your teeth get wet. People don't often carry around bottles of water to just get their teeth wet. It's an unusual trigger that's hidden by a normal process. Now, you think your quirk requires physical contact to work. You touch me and you can speak into my head, read my current train of thoughts, and you can let me speak into your head. Recently, you've been practicing going beyond the current train of thought to look deeper, right? He nodded in confirmation. Good. Well, I want to test to see if physical contact is the only way to make it work. She walked up to Izuku and held his hand. Read by thoughts. As soon as you can't hear anything, hold your hand up. Despite the various different things the pair tried, it appeared that his quirk only worked through physical contact. Holding his breath didn't lengthen his control. Closing his eyes didn't make the link last longer. Okay, one last thing I can think of, Tony wasn't frustrated in the slightest. She was familiar with tricky quirks. It took her years to figure out the full extent of her own powers. She wanted to give Izuku as much time to master his before their time together ended. Take this and sit on the other side of the room. Izuku took a small bundle from her and began to make his way across the room. All right, Konahito, open it and hold what's inside in your hand. He opened the small bag and pulled out what appeared to be one of Tony's scrunchies. His face crumpled up with confusion, eyebrows furrowing together under his white curls. Oh, he looks so cute when he's confused. I really hope this works, he'd be bummed out if it didn't. Izuku hurriedly looked between his hand and Tony. His eyes were wider than the full moon in the sky, his mouth fell open from shock. She smiled brightly, a little on the cocky side. I take it worked? You could hear me? Listening to someone's thoughts was always weird. Listening to Tony's thoughts was mental gymnastics. She thought in a mixture of Spanish and English. While she had been working on teaching Izuku her native language, he was still only conversational. Despite not knowing the direct translation of her thoughts, he still perfectly understood. Oh, thank God, that one was a shot in the dark. Oh shit, he can still hear me. Izuku, ignore any swears I think from now on. What's the trigger? How am I able to hear you just from holding your scrunchie? It's not the scrunchie, Konahito. It's my hair on the scrunchie. Your quirk isn't activated by touch, it's activated by DNA. When you touch someone, whether it's their clothes or part of their body, you're constantly in contact with some of their DNA. Izuku stared blankly at his hand, mostly in disbelief. But, projected into my head. His face scrunched up a bit in determination and he nodded. Why didn't we figure this out sooner? I'm sure I've touched things with my father's DNA on it. Well, my best guess is that when you first discovered your quirk, you weren't able to use it on small pieces of DNA like the scrunchie. Over time, your quirk strengthened, and the ability appeared, but you're so used to only hearing things when touching someone, so you never even tried to reach out. Does that make sense? He nodded slowly. I didn't find it because I didn't think to look? Tony smiled and nodded. Exactly, Konahito, exactly. From now on, I want you to wear that scrunchie on your wrist and use it to talk to me, okay? Do what you can, don't strain yourself. He nodded excitedly and slipped it onto his wrist. The scrunchie was silky and dark purple. He had to wrap it around his wrist twice to make it stay. Despite it being a fashion statement for the 9-year-old boy, he didn't care at all. He was far too excited to explore the new aspect of his quirk to care. While his father never spoke to him much about his quirk, Tony reminded him regularly about how amazing and powerful it was. Quirks that fell into the broad telepath category were rare. There was only one well-known pro-hero with a telepath-type quirk. The fact that he was able to communicate in such a way at such a young age was a marvel, especially considering he was developing the ability to mind read. Now, let me guess, we're keeping this from your old man? Tony asked, quirking an eyebrow. She never bothered hiding her distaste for Izuku's father when it was just the two of them. She had known the man for 5 years and had only stuck around for Izuku's sake. The small boy nodded. He doesn't even know about the mind-reading aspect. He only thinks I can hear people's trains of thought and talk to others. Izuku had never outwardly complained about his father to Antonella, but she knew that something was wrong in that house. Sadly, the police don't accept gut feelings about well-liked members of the community, especially ones that happen to be a widower. While Izuku doesn't remember much from after the accident that killed his mother and left him with scars. What he does remember about the time immediately after is the lack of warmth. His mother had always been there for him, not necessarily at his beck and call, but he knew that she would do whatever she should be make him happy and feel loved. After she died, he was lucky if his father were even home early enough to say goodnight to him before his bedtime. Hisashi wasn't a bad father in the normal sense. A normal father that is absent commits to the act. They either leave all parenting up to someone else and reap the benefits of having a child without doing any of the dirty work, or they leave altogether. Izuku wishes his father were the later. While he left Toni up to raising Izuku mostly by herself, he still inserted himself in Izuku's life, simply to make his presence known. At times, it seemed as if he didn't see Izuku as his child, but as his investment. The child had never been pushed into situations that were outright dangerous, but there had been many times where he's met a coworker of his father that was just a little too interested in his quirk. "You're so lucky, Hisashi, you must use him all the time." Izuku never liked his father's coworkers. "Maybe he can help us out when he's older? Just pull the training wheels off and he could join us now." It was strange. Izuku didn't know that his father's job was. From how much Hisashi seemed to obsess over how useful his son's quirk was, he never wanted Izuku to use it on himself. Izuku didn't want to use it on his father. He didn't remember the exact details of the last time he did, but he did remember that it was scary. And so Hisashi spoke and Izuku signed. "All right, I think that's enough for tonight," Toni thought to Izuku as she closed up the gym. "Let's get back home so we can get you into bed. You may not have school tomorrow, but I did promise to take you to the new Hero H Museum." She led the way out holding Izuku's hand in her own with her bag balanced on her shoulder. It was dark outside, getting to the time of night when those that feared the laws of the day came out from hiding. Toni wasn't scared, she never was. Izuku wasn't scared if Toni wasn't. The walk back to the apartment was about as quiet as it could get in New York. There were drunks stumbling through the streets, sketchy teens with too much time on their hands sitting on the curb, and people standing on the corner, looking for company for the night. No one approached the pair as they walked the streets. Everyone seemed to disappear back into the shadows and alleys. Everyone disappeared except for him. "All right, girlie, I don't want to hurt you, but I will. Put your hands where I can see 'em." A man smelling of cigarette smoke and stale beer pressed a dull knife into the middle of Antonella's back. "Go nice and slow, otherwise the kitty over here gets it." He slowly dragged the knife down her back to make a point before shifting the blade so it rested against Izuku's neck. Izuku was scared because Toni was scared. Toni was scared of what the man would do to him. All right. I'm putting my hands up. Don't do anything rash. I don't want him getting hurt." She slowly put her hands up, going at the pace of a snail to keep the man from getting spooked. "Can you tell me what you want?" Her voice wavered as she spoke, letting out hints of her fear. I just want your wallet." "Where's it?" "It's in my bag. It should be in the zipper pocket on front." The man made his way around Toni, keeping the knife somewhat aimed at the small boy. He unzipped the pocket and began to rummage about for her promised wallet, seeming to struggle to find it despite the small size of the pocket. His knife lowered away from Izuku's neck as he began to rip into other pockets to find it. "Where's it, you slut?" "It's not in there." The knife slipped lower. Toni took a deep breath, exhaling deeply through her nose. "My mistake, I might have just thrown it into the main pocket. I wasn't paying close attention." The man's attention was fully on searching her bag now. He didn't even notice that she no longer had her hands up. "I wasn't paying attention like you aren't right now." Without another word, Toni grabbed the wrist holding the knife and pulled it away from Izuku. She twisted his arm roughly until he cried out with a pained yelp, being forced to drop the knife. She continued to twist his arm until he was spun around with his back to her. Don't you aim a knife at him again too, hijo de puta. Her voice was low and even. She kicked the back of knees until he fell to the ground, still with an arm pinned behind his back. Mierda. You must be new around here, or you're just an idiot. I am not your girlie, and I am not a slut. You will treat me with respect because you won't get a second chance to disrespect me. She shoved him fully to the ground and placed her foot between his shoulder blades. Hey now, I was just playing with ya. That's it. The man squirmed a bit, his pupils blown wide. Sweat dripped down his face, leaving tracks in the grime that was layered there already. Just making sure you were paying attention. There are dangerous people out at night, you should be careful, especially with the kitty around. Tony smiled, but there wasn't an ounce of sugar in it. She leaned in dangerously close and dug her heel into his back further. I think I've more than proved myself capable of keeping us both safe. There's a reason why people crept back as we passed. You should learn from them. She held her hand out blindly, knowing that Izuku would take it. Come on, Konahito, it's far past your bedtime. She made a point of stepping on the man as she led Izuku away. In the first show of intelligence all night, the man stayed on the ground. You know, if you act like that while dressed as a civilian, people will make the connection between you and Spectrum. Tony snorted softly as they finally reached the apartment building. I don't care if those idiots figure it out. They're all scared of me. Those guys are petty thugs at best. I only care about the big fish, but they hide in shadows far darker than I would take you. Don't worry. The stairs creaked as they climbed up to their floor. Reaching her apartment was a relief for them both. All right, bedtime for you. I'll be going out as usual. Don't unlock the door or windows for anyone. If someone shows up, hide in the closet. Tony kissed his forehead and sent him to his room. As he got ready to finally go to sleep, she got changed into her gear. She wore a black slash-proof bodysuit with gray Kevlar protecting the most vital areas. Around her waist was a utility belt with various pockets filled with anything and everything a vigilante could need. A cowl hid her hair and a tactical mask with tinted glass covered her face. Everything about her outfit exuded power. Even her boots. Especially her boots. They were knee-high with steel toes and spikes around the toe for extra traction. The first time Izuku saw her dressed up, he was scared. Now, he took the sight of her in her gear as a relief. When she was Spectrum, nothing could hurt her, and nothing could stop her. Alright, I'm heading out. Get to bed and remember what I said. With that, she climbed out of the window and dove into the night. Izuku wasn't sure what it was that woke him up, but there was no way he'd be able to fall back to sleep anytime soon. Looking at the small analog clock next to his bed revealed that it was just after 3 in the morning. Tony should be home by now, Izuku thought to himself. He climbed out of his bed and crept quietly to the kitchen. The kitchen was bathed in shadows with the only light source being the screens on the various appliances. Izuku turned on the light above the sink, just so he had enough light to get what needed, but not too much light where it would wake Tony. With the light on, he pulled his little footstool out and searched through the cabinets to find his favorite mug. It was a chipped and very loved mug that was designed after All Might's Bronze Age costume. Izuku opened the fridge and grabbed the milk, carefully pouring some into his mug. He replaced the milk and set his mug into the microwave, heating it for exactly 53 seconds. He pulled it out once it was ready and took a seat at the table, slowly sipping from his mug. Izuku was never scared of the dark. Izuku heard the telltale sound of beads clanging and twisting together, a sound that signified someone was walking into the small kitchen. He turned to greet Tony. It wasn't Tony. A man was untangling himself from the beads with a falling smirk on his face. His skin was tanned with black symbols tattooed around both of his eyes. Izuku slowly set his mug down, a faint thump being drowned out by the sound of his own beating heart. Izuku kept the table between himself and the man. Despite Tony teaching him self-defense, he stood no chance against him. This man, this intruder, towered over the boy with his hulking frame. No amount of hold breaks would be able to stop him. Now, you can make this easy on yourself by coming with me silently, or you can make this painful for yourself and little Antonella. The tattooed man brushed his open jacket back enough to show off the gun on his hip. Izuku slowly nodded. Despite the faith he held in Tony, she was asleep right now. If she woke up before this man dragged him out, there was no way she could stand against a loaded gun. She may be able to handle situations like this when she was out fighting crime in the night, but right now, she was just a sleeping babysitter with an armed intruder trying to take her ward. Also, Izuku had no way to get her. He couldn't scream. Izuku reached into her mind but was instantly hit with the characteristic incoherent snippets of speech and pictures of a dream. Anything he tried to say would just be brought into her dream, written off as some strange production of her dream theater. As soon as Izuku was within reach, the man grabbed him by the upper arm. That was a lot easier than expected. I'm glad the beach didn't wake up. She'd definitely make this a headache. Time to deliver the little sheet to Gio and Angel. Hopefully Hisashi doesn't put up a big fuss about us doing this before he gave permission. The man either didn't know about the full extent of his quirk or didn't care. Either way, Izuku now knew for certain that his father wasn't a simple office worker. Izuku was dragged from the apartment. Nothing was out of place or outwardly wrong. The floors and stairs creaked as Izuku was led down to a car waiting in front of the building. The car was black with tinted windows and no plates. As the car door slammed behind him, Izuku gave one last glance up at Tony's apartment. The light to her room flicked on and a dark figure appeared in her window. The car pulled away before Izuku could even attempt to catch her attention. Two men sat in the front. Izuku's kidnapper sat next to him. The two men in the front looked him over appraisingly. The one driving looked plain except for the two horns protruding from his forehead. One was snapped and jagged near the base. The other man had purple-tinted skin and black hair. Yeah, he doesn't really look like Hisashi. The only similarities are the curls and freckles. You sure this is the right kid? Mr. Horns asked. Yeah, Mr. Tattoos said. I'm sure it's the right kid. He was in Spectrum's apartment just like Hisashi always talks about. By the way, Hisashi never gave the green light, so be ready to blow some smoke up his butt. Mr. Purple sighed in a long-suffering kind of way. Of course, why didn't we wait for the hothead's approval? Mr. Tattoo shrugged. The boss wanted to meet Izuku. Sure, I'm scared of Hisashi, but I'm more scared of the boss. I'm not about to tell him no. At that, everyone murmured their agreements. The car ride was uncomfortably silent. Mr. Horns coughed a few times, clearing his throat. Mr. Purple glanced at him out of the corner of his eyes, not verbalizing his disdain for the sound. Not gonna say anything, kid? Mr. Tattoos asked. Brats your age usually don't shut up. Mr. Purple sighed. If you had paid attention, you would know that he's completely mute. Hisashi complains about it every day. Izuku knew that his dad wasn't the loving type, but to hear that he openly complained about him still hurt. He knows ASL, JSL, and can talk into your head if you have physical contact with him. That being said, I would recommend having skin-to-skin contact with him, because he can hear your current train of thought. Knowing you too, he would know all of our secrets by sunrise, Mr. Purple said. Mr. Purple was obviously the brains of this three-person operation. Whether the other two listened to him was still to be determined. Izuku appeared to be ignoring the three of them. Instead, he busied himself with looking out of the cold, dew-covered window. The droplets scattered the neon lights from outside, blurring the dark picture. It was still late at night, or, well, early in the morning depending how you looked at it. They exited the parts of New York that Izuku was familiar with. He could no longer discern the high-rises from the banks and bodegas, the smudged glass and rusted frames all blurred together into one large, indiscernible picture of modernity. Izuku never told his father when he found out something new about his quirk. There was no single moment that defined his reason as to why he cut himself off from his father, but at this moment he was glad that he did. It was easy to figure out why he was taken. Everyone commented on how popular he would be in the future because of how useful and rare his quirk was. No one except Tony knew about the full extent of his quirk. He planned to keep it that way. Alright, here we are. Keep a hold on the kid Santino, Mr. Purple said. I thought you said not to touch him? Mr. Tattoos no, Santino asked. Mr. Purple climbed out. You can grab him without touching him. Just grab him by his shirt or something, you have a brain. Use it, Despite only knowing him for less than an hour, Izuku already knew that Santino's silence was uncharacteristic of him. Santino grabbed Izuku, dragging him out and into the unassuming building that lay before them. It appeared industrial, all concrete, steel beams, and glass. Mr. Purple walked in the front, opening the doors by typing in a passcode at every other door. Mr. Horns and Santino followed close behind, with Izuku walking between them. Santino grabbed the front of Izuku's shirt, dragging him along so he wasn't left behind. Izuku stumbled with every step, but was kept upright by the larger man. "Right in here," Mr. Purple said as he led the way into a room towards the center, or what Izuku thought was the center of the building. The door was simple, a startling juxtaposition of the interior. The room was filled with luxurious furniture made of worn leather and surrounded by paintings of artists of times long forgotten. Izuku was led inside and forced to sit on a couch between Mr. Horns and Santino. As he sat, he sunk into the couch and took in the vast reaches of the room. A man walked in through a door on the opposite side. He wore an ink-back suit, accented by a silver watch with an obsidian face. His hair was a startling shade of silver, but it wasn't from age. His eyes were the same shade, sunken in and proud. He was handsome in a way, but it was unsettling. "Ah, the famous Izu Midoriya," the man smirked as he waltzed in. "It's truly a pleasure, my child. I hope you hold no ill feelings of me and my men for bringing you here by less than desirable methods." The two men sitting on the couch on either side of Izuku straightened the posture once the man spoke. Mr. Purple, who remained standing, kept an easy posture, leaning against one of the various armchairs. "Your father should be joining us soon. I take it you're unfamiliar with our line of work? Well, to put it simply, your father is my enforcer. He only works as a financial manager during the day to keep up appearances. Our business is less than legal, to put it simply. Your quirk opens up many avenues for us, and I plan on utilizing every single one." The man took a seat in the armchair Mr. Purple was leaning on. "Your father already told us that he planned on bringing you in to help. We just decided to move the schedule up a tiny bit." A silence grew between the five of them. The man simply looked at Izuku with a small, superficial smile. "Oh, I should probably mention. I do know ASL, my child, so don't worry about being unable to communicate. I want to go home." Izuku knew it wasn't likely he would be listened to, but he could at least try. "I'm sorry, my dear child, but I'm afraid I can't do that." Izuku stared down at his hands, trying to figure out what exactly was happening. So much had been thrown onto him despite him still being groggy from sleep. "I take it I have no choice in this, mister?" "Ah, my apologies. You can call me Angel. And you're correct, you don't have a choice. Though, I'm not sure as to why you wouldn't do as we please. If you do as we want, we can reward you very well, my boy. Anything you want will be yours. I already consider your father to be something of a brother, which means you're my nephew. I take family very seriously. I have a bad habit of spoiling those close to me." Given Izuku's age, it was intriguing. His morals and experience tugged at the back of his mind, reminding him of everything that Tony had ever taught him. "When can I talk to my dad, Mr. Angel?" "He'll be here soon, my dear child, don't worry." Angel reclined back in his seat. "I seem to have forgotten all of my manners. Dimitri, get little Izuku a glass of hot cocoa. Extra marshmallows." Mr. Horn stood up and left the room. He looked a little sweaty. He was clearly relieved at an excuse to leave the room. "I do love children, I really do. If you need anything, just let me know." He glanced down at his watch. "I'm guessing your father should be here in the next 30 minutes or so. I have a room ready for you. You can sleep after the three of us have our little talk." Izuku nodded, knowing there was no logical reason to argue. Angel, his father, and the other three men could each best him easily in any test of physical prowess, there was no doubt. Izuku's only hope of getting out of this situation was Tony, but she was miles away in an empty apartment. The door that Angel had entered through opened once again. Hisashi walked in, rumpled in appearance. He was normally dressed with care. He wore his shirts perfectly pressed and tucked into pristine dress pants, a silk tie woven into a trinity knot, and his curly hair carefully styled so it didn't have in his face. Izuku took in every aspect of his father's appearance: wrinkly and untucked shirt, the lack of a belt, and an undone tie hanging loosely around his neck. "I apologize for my tardiness, I was finishing up some business." Smoke curled past his lips as he strode inside. He sat himself in an armchair directly next to Angel. He made no outward reaction to his son being there. "I hope you don't mind that I brought little Izuku here. You talk about him so much, I couldn't wait to meet my little nephew." Angel didn't bother to look at Hisashi. Even if Hisashi didn't approve, there was nothing he could do. Even though he was high-ranking, he still had no place to argue openly with Angel about a decision such as this. Hisashi shook his head, face creased and tense. "No, it's perfectly fine. I just wish I could have introduced him to you all during the day. It's a bit late for him." "Yes, and I apologize for that. I decided to kill two birds with one stone. I get to meet him, and I force Spectrum to learn her place. Maybe she'll start to behave once she realizes the child she adores so much is in our hands." Dimitri cuts off whatever Hisashi was about to say by entering, carrying a small tray. A dark maroon, steaming mug was in the center of the tray with a small plate of cookies next to it. "Ah, perfect. Thank you so much, Dimitri. Just place it on the coffee table in front of our little guest." As Dimitri passed the others to set the tray down, Angel snagged a cookie. He took a small bite before lazily offering the rest to Mr. Purple, who was still positioned behind him. Mr. Purple silently took it and delicately nibbled on it, careful to not spill crumbs onto the chair he was leaning on, or the man sitting in the chair. Izuku picked up the mug with both hands, cradling it close. He took a careful sip, not wanting to burn himself. He was pleasantly surprised to find that the drink was smooth and creamy, lacking the faint bitterness that contaminated powdered mixes. Angel smiled softly. This smile was genuine and reached his eyes. "Taste good? I despise the cheap versions of hot cocoa. I'm a big fan of them myself." He shifted in his chair, so his head leaned against Mr. Purple's arm. "Now, to talk about how you'll be helping us out." Everyone sat up straighter. "I want you to come here 3 days out of the week. The rest of the days, you can spend with Spectrum. I know you like her. On the 3 days you're here with us, I'll be teaching you myself the secrets behind our operation. You'll help me out with data collection. Everyone's guard goes down around cute kids. Sound good, little one?" Izuku slowly nodded. At least Angel seemed to be somewhat agreeable. Izuku was glad he wouldn't be spending the entire 3 days with his father. "Good boy," Angel said as he stood. "Now, you can follow me to your room. Don't worry, Hisashi, I'll make sure little Izuku gets to bed." Hisashi nodded stiffly and stood. He left the room without another word, not even acknowledging his son. Angel took Izuku's hand once the small boy finished his cocoa. Izuku was led through a maze of hallways and doors until they reached an area of the building that had the guise of being residential. A wooden door was opened to reveal a room painted in white, filled with polished wooden furniture and a bed far larger than anything Izuku had ever seen before. "Here we are, little one. There should be a pair of PJs that'll fit you on the nightstand. Sleep well, all right?" "Okay, thank you, Mr. Angel." Angel jolted a bit, then smiled widely. "Of course, Izuku." With that, Angel disappeared into his own room a couple doors down. Mr. Purple followed him in soon after. Izuku closed the door to his new room. He took a second to take in everything before changing into the softest flannel PJs he had ever felt. He climbed up into the bed and tried to make himself comfortable amongst the vast mounds of pillows and blankets. "I'm sorry, Tony," Izuku thought to himself as he gazed at the scrunchie still on his wrist. He soon succumbed to sleep for the second time that night. Consciousness toyed with the edges of Izuku's mind. His sleep wasn't filled with dreams, it was plagued by a void of silence. His sleep was silent and peaceful, but it wasn't refreshing. "Izuku, little one, it's time to wake up. We have your lessons after breakfast," Mr. Angel called through the door. Unlike Hisashi, Mr. Angel respected Izuku's boundaries as much as possible. Hisashi saw Izuku as an extension of himself, as his possession. As strange as it might be, Izuku couldn't find himself totally hating Mr. Angel. Despite not being fully awake, the small boy pulled himself out of bed and began the task of dressing himself. There wasn't much consideration to be made. His outfit for the day was always left out before he woke up. Apparently Izuku didn't have a good fashion sense, but that was something that could be taught over time according to Mr. Angel. Mr. Angel was usually the one that picked everything out, purposely making it so that they matched to some degree. Today's outfit was slim black dress pants with a charcoal button-up. Izuku had his doubts about that, but he wouldn't say anything. Izuku poked his head out once he was ready, looking up to find Mr. Angel leaning against the wall next to the door. "There you are, Aizu, let's grab some breakfast. You've been doing very well in your lessons, so I think we can go out this morning," he said as he started to lead the way. Mr. Purple slipped out of Mr. Angel's room and fell into step behind the two of them. "Remember, Aizu, shirt stays tucked until we get to the car. You know how much of a fit your dad throws when you leave it untucked." Izuku had been taking lessons from Mr. Angel for a few weeks now. Despite knowing Mr. Angel and those higher up in the ranks for a few weeks now, Izuku still didn't know Mr. Purple's name. It wasn't really important, but it still bothered the small boy. Izuku had asked him for his name after the first night, but it seems that Mr. Angel found the nickname endearing and forbade Mr. Purple from telling him his name. "I'm in the mood for pancakes. What about you, Izuku?" "Mr. Purple?" He barely held back a laugh as he asked. Silence stretched between the three of them. Mr. Purple opened the car door for them once they made it outside, decidedly staying silent. Mr. Angel looked to Izuku, hoping for an answer. The small boy just shrugged. Mr. Angel sighed loudly and theatrically. "I don't know what I expected. Neither of you are big talkers, especially you, little one. Take us to the usual diner, Mr. Purple." Mr. Anyel climbed into the back with Izuku, Mr. Purple taking the driver's seat. Izuku looked out of the window while Mr. Angel hummed along with the music from his playlist. It was a menagerie of electro swing and modern jazz. Mr. Purple had his eyes firmly on the road ahead of them, only looking back every once in a while to roll his eyes at his boss's performance. Izuku was a fan of the music, but it was a bit much sometimes. Mornings were much more relaxing when they listened to Mr. Purple's playlist, which was mostly an artist named Donnell Jones from times long gone. Mr. Purple was mean, but not in a cruel kind of way. It was more of a grumpy old tomcat that was feral as a kitten kind of way. Despite his outwards demeanor, it was clear he took the safety of those under his protection seriously. "Now, Aizu, when we go in, I want you to practice reading the mind of our waitress, all right? I want you to tell me everything she thinks of." Izuku nodded. So far, his lessons with Mr. Angel had largely been on knowing when someone is lying to you, how to move without being noticed in daylight, and strengthening his quirk. At the same time, Tony began to give him new lessons as well. "They took you right out from under me. I can't believe their audacity," Tony had yelled as she pulled him into her arms. "I'm glad to have you back in one piece, mi pequeño conejito." She held Izuku at arm's length and looked him over slowly, face smoothing in relief once she saw that he was physically unharmed. He hadn't been gone long at all. Mr. Angel and Hisashi returned him to Tony the next morning after he woke up. It wasn't that long for a kidnapping, but it was enough to put Tony on edge. "If they're going to teach you lessons, then I suppose I have to start mine as well. I doubt they'll show you everything you'll need to know." She gently kissed the top of his head and threaded her fingers through his curls. "I'll get you into shape, you'll be able to run away from anyone. If running isn't an option, then you'll be able to drop a grown man to his knees." "How does that sound, Izuku?" "I like the sound of that, Tony," he thought to her as he offered a small smile. It was that night that Spectrum appeared with a tiny shadow. Mr. Purple held the door as Mr. Angel led the way in, Izuku following closely behind. While they weren't related in the slightest, the way their clothes and hair matched helped with the illusion. A waitress at the door commented on it as she welcomed them warmly, showing them to an empty table. Angel lightly pushed Izuku's back, telling him that the waitress leading them was the one. Izuku reached out his hand to try and grab one of the hairs tangled around the hair tie wrapped around her wrist, but she turned too quickly. With a promise of returning for their orders, she walked off. "All right, little one. What would you like?" Mr. Angel asked after a few minutes of looking at the menu. "I'll be getting strawberry pancakes myself." "Mr. Purple," he glanced over at the stone-faced bodyguard. "He'll be having the buttermilk pancakes with bacon, right?" Mr. Purple offered no verbal response, just nodded once. Right? Like I said, you can get whatever you want, Aizu. Just let me know and I'll order for the three of us. Mr. Angel was very different from Hisashi. Izuku's father never let him order what he wanted. Whatever Izuku wanted was always too unhealthy or too sweet. Despite being a father, Hisashi really wasn't a good dad. Can I have the chocolate chip pancakes? Mr. Angel smiled softly. Of course, little one. Would you like chocolate milk as well? The small boy nodded meekly. All right, I'll put in that order for us. Remember, Aizu, try to do as I said, all right? The hardest part of doing as he said was either making contact with the waitress for as long as possible or getting someone with her DNA on it. Her hair was pulled up into a messy bun and her clothes were neat. There wasn't a detail out of place despite the hectic atmosphere of the diner. The small boy looked down at his hands, trying to think of way he could get access to her mind. His hands were a little dry, cracking in some areas. His nails were starting to get long. He hated cutting them, but he hated them getting in the way even more. Nails. It was a simple, albeit awkward solution. All right, you three boys, what can I get for you? The waitress asked as she reached for their menus. Izuku quickly scooped them up in his hands and handed them over, accidentally scratching the waitress's hands as they touched his. Sorry, Izuku signed frantically, putting on his best face of sincerity. The waitress rubbed the red streak on her hand lightly. I'm guessing that's an apology. Don't worry, darling, accidents happen. Just make sure you cut those nails of yours, they're almost claws. She pulled a small notepad out. Anyway, what can I get for you three? As Mr. Angel began to order, Izuku was hit by a sudden influx of the waitress's thoughts. Why the F does this guy have a kid with him? Maybe they could use this. I'll give them a call after I put in their order. The waitress walked away as soon as she finished writing everything down, promising to have their drinks out soon. I gotta say, Aizu, Mr. Angel said in a low voice as he leaned forward onto the table, closing the distance between them. That was pretty smart scratching her. What do you have so far? She thought it was weird that you have me with you. She's making a call to someone as soon as she puts our order in. Izuku kept his signs small and close to his chest, just in case anyone that knew sign was watching. It wasn't likely, but Mr. Angel had taught him it is always better to be safe than sorry. His hands paused as he focused again on her thoughts. She's talking to someone on the phone right now. It's a man. He sounds amused? He's amused that you have a kid with you. He told her that he's on his way. Mr. Purple didn't like that one bit. Mr. Angel looked more amused than worried. They both not so subtly shifted so their guns were more easily reachable. Who's the waitress? Why did you want me to listen to her? I wasn't sure about anything until this moment, but she's an informant for a group that have made me mad. They're not respecting my power and control in these areas, they're getting a little too bold. Izuku had watched movies with crime bosses and shootouts with Tony before. He had never wanted to live through it. The look on his face must have betrayed his feelings because Mr. Angel chuckled softly. Don't worry, we'll keep you safe. He trusted Mr. Angel. The informant waitress appeared a few minutes later with their drinks and steaming plates of food. The pancakes were absolutely humongous. There was no way the small boy would be able to finish his entire plate. Before starting to eat, Izuku used Tony's scrunchie to pull his hair back into a messy ponytail, not wanting to get syrup in his hair. A few curls refused to be restrained and fell across his forehead, but thankfully, they were short enough to not be in the way. The three of them ate silently. Well, Mr. Purple and Izuku ate silently while Mr. Angel occasionally interjected his current thoughts. The other patrons in the diner were all civil for the most part, just a little loud at times. There were a few young couples, a small group of middle schoolers, and plenty of older folk catching up with their friends. All in all, it was a pleasant breakfast. It was pleasant until the men wearing half-masquerade masks appeared. Mr. Angel was sitting between Mr. Purple and the wall with Izuku across from them both. Izuku was the one closest to the door. He hadn't even turned to look who had walked in when the small bell above the door chimed. People had been walking in and out semi-regularly since they had arrived, so the boy had assumed it was nothing. Cold metal pressed against the back of his neck. Izuku froze, hoping that if he continued to look straight forward, the feeling would disappear. He slowly raised his eyes to look at Mr. Angel. Outwardly, he appeared relaxed. Izuku could see his neck twitch slightly, betraying his anger. Now, what do we have here, boys? I was trying to enjoy breakfast with my two favorite people, and you show up to ruin it? That's quite rude. Izuku couldn't see Mr. Purple's hands as they were under the table, but it was safe to assume he had one hand on his gun and the other hand on Mr. Angel, ready to pull him down to safety if need be. Shut it, you! You'll listen to me unless you want his white hair to turn red, one of the men yelled as they pressed the gun further into Izuku's neck. You need to learn a FING lesson, alright? You may have run this area in the past, but it's ours now. Alright, I'm listening. I don't see why you need to pull the boy into this though. Mr. Angel kept his tone even, schooling his face into true neutrality. He hasn't done anything. Hurting him would buy you more enemies than you can handle. The man holding the gun scoffed. This brat is my insurance that you listen and don't move too fast. I will not hesitate to blow his brains out. Mr. Angel slowly nodded, seeming to consider the man's words. Alright, you have me as a captive audience. What exactly is it that you want me to do? I do hope you aren't threatening him simply to make yourself seem like a bigger threat than you are. Shut the f***. What you're going to do is make your dragon back off of our new territory. He's been messing with our business since we moved in. Our dragon? Ah yes, you mean the Japanese man? The one with curly black hair. Yes. The one with the FING fire-breathing quirk. The gun shook against Izuku's neck as the man spoke. Call your attack dog off and we'll be fine. Mr. Angel nodded. That's a reasonable request. My question is simple. What do you plan to do with the boy once this conversation is over? We'll bring him with us. We'll release him a few blocks from here to ensure that you don't follow us. Follow us and we'll shoot him. So, what I'm hearing is that you want my men to back off the territory you stole from us. To ensure we do, you're taking a boy you don't know hostage. What holds us to our word once you release him to us? The man was starting to get agitated. It was clear he had been hoping for this to be quick. Then we'll find this brat and kill him. The man spoke through gritted teeth, spitting. Izuku had been hoping for a nice morning, one filled with pancakes and lessons on lying. Having a gun pressed to his neck was a bit much. He let his eyes wander, keeping his head stock still so as not to spook his captor. Everyone that had been in the restaurant was gone. He hadn't noticed them leaving. He hadn't noticed much, it seems. A few other men in masquerade masks were spread out throughout the diner, their guns aimed at Mr. Angel and Mr. Purple. Do you know who he is? It was still strange to think about how his father was a criminal. Izuku didn't know exactly what he did, but he knew it must have been bad. Hisashi was the only person that the men with masquerade masks could have been talking about. Why the F does it matter? He's a brat with a gun to his head. If you don't call off the dragon, we'll shoot him. A droplet of condensation sped down the side of Izuku's glass of chocolate milk. He had only drunk about half of it before the men stormed in. His pancakes were in a similar state, quickly cooling despite only a few bites having been taken from them. Mr. Purple coughed softly, barely drawing attention from anyone. Well, threatening to shoot a child to get me to call off my man would normally work, but if you shoot him, I can't promise the kind of reaction my favorite dragon will have. You see, that boy is his son, Mr. Angel said with a smile that didn't seem very happy or genuine. You shoot that boy, and my dragon will come after you with no remorse. So, as I see this, you have no bargaining chip. Coughing and hacking in the background grew in volume until it couldn't be ignored by anyone. Somehow, the disgust the men felt was visible through their masquerade masks. The men in masquerade masks didn't like what Mr. Angel said. They disliked Mr. Purple standing even more. They quickly shoved him back into his seat. Please, he has problems with allergies. Let him go to the bathroom and fix himself. If he's gone, I have no one protecting myself, Angel said placatingly. Izuku assumes the man holding the gun to his neck nodded as Mr. Purple was quickly pulled up by two men, both shoved a gun into his side. He willingly walked a few steps with them before attempting to catch his breath. He inhaled deeply. He released his breath with a purple cloud filling the air around him. As soon as the guards holding him breathed it in, they dropped like flies. With the 2 guards down, he turned to a third man that was positioned between the table and bathrooms. He pulled out his ready gun and shot the man before he could even blink, before he could comprehend what had happened to the men with him. Izuku felt the gun move away from its place on his neck. He relaxed infinitesimally. He ducked down a bit, moving enough so he could see the man that had been threatening his life thus far. He was wearing a crimson and obsidian mask. His gun was aimed right at Mr. Purple. Before he could even twitch to pull the trigger, Mr. Angel swung his arm up and shot him in the head. Point blank. He fell and the ground was soon the same shade as his mask. Mr. Angel and Izuku relaxed. "You beach!" The waitress appeared from her hiding place behind the counter. She was shaking, but her hand was steady as she pulled out a gun and aimed it at Izuku. Mr. Purple was never relaxed. The bullet flew from the gun, tearing through the small diner in seconds. Izuku was shoved down and was soon covered by a spray of red. Mr. Purple grunted softly, his only indication of pain as he slumped over Izuku, continuing to guard the small boy with his own body. Mr. Angel's easygoing disposition was long gone. The look on his face could only be compared with the hottest fires that burned in the most cursed layers of hell. His gun fired 3 times. First, he hit her hand holding the gun. Second, he hit her stomach. "You really shouldn't have done that," he said as he watched her sink to her knees. "I would love to draw this out for you, but I'm particularly attached to him and don't feel like losing him." Third, he hit her between the eyes, the gunshot ringing out. A gunshot rang out in the distance. Spectrum perked up from her position on the roof. "Come on, Izuku, time to practice your parkour on the way over." Spectrum had been teaching him her ways ever since he had been kidnapped. He was quickly picking up parkour. Hand-to-hand combat was still hard to understand for the small boy. Running and jumping and rolling was easy to him. "Okay, I'm guessing you want me to stay on the roof while you check it out then?" he asked as they started to run along the rooftops, jumping over obstacles as they appeared. "Got it in one Konohito, up high and out of sight." The night air was cool and crisp but could never be described as fresh. The city was never truly dark. It was called the city that never sleeps for a reason. Neon signs cast colored glows along the sidewalk, making the shadows of the alleys even more inky by comparison. As they came upon the scene with gunfire, they both hid behind an air conditioning unit on the roof of an old apartment building. Spectrum peeked her head out from around the bulky structure to take in the details of the fight. "Alright, stay here. It shouldn't take too long. If I'm not back up here in 10 minutes, call for my backup." Saying that, she disappeared over the side of the building. She quite literally dropped into the middle of the fight. No matter how badly Izuku wanted to peek over the edge to watch her work, he refrained. Staying out of sight required him to stay fully out of sight with no care for his curiosity. A gunshot went off. Izuku was led from the diner, his eyes wide and face still covered in blood. He had never seen intentional violence like that before. He had never seen someone killed. Proof of the death he witnessed existed in the gray matter on the bottom of his shoes. "All right then, let's go," Mr. Angel said as he gently placed Mr. Purple into the back of the car with Izuku. Only one of them spared the diner a glance as they drove away. Spectrum hauled herself back onto the roof, only slightly winded. "All right, Konohito, let's go. The police should be here soon." Without glancing back, she took off. She knew that Izuku would follow. What were they fighting over? Izuku asked as he leapt a gap between buildings. She didn't look over her shoulder. "Some drag. I've never seen it before. My best guess is that it's some form of trigger. I really hope there isn't a new dealer in the area." She had told Izuku about trigger before. A quirk-enhancing drag that could last anywhere from a few minutes to a few hours. You never knew until it wore off. Those that used it became stronger at the cost of lowered mental inhibitions and the chance of permanent body changes. Thankfully, none of them took it. Or if they did, it wasn't noticeable. "I think we should head back. It's starting to get late, and you have school tomorrow." The way back to the apartment always seemed to take longer than the trip out. He loved experiencing the night with Tony No, Spectrum. It was exhilarating. He always slept amazingly after a night of running and jumping along rooftops. He never saw any action, Spectrum made sure of that. She had told him up front that he wasn't getting physically involved in anything until he could pin her while sparing. That wasn't happening anytime soon. The two of them were able to parkour their way onto the apartment roof. They made their way down to their floor and climbed in through the window. As soon as they were both in, they stripped off their gear. Izuku wasn't sure how Tony got in it so fast, but he had a bulletproof vest that fit over a plain black hoodie. Besides the vest, he also had shin guards that wrapped over his knees, arms guards, and helmet with a visor. Tony was taking no chances with his safety. "I'll start teaching you weapons tomorrow night. A few of my friends said they could help out." "I'm only good with staffs and batons," Tony said as she unzipped her bodysuit. Peeling it off, she was left in athletic shorts, a sports bra, and an alarming amount of scars. "You get cleaned up and get to bed, all right? I don't want to get a call about you falling asleep in class tomorrow." She gently ruffled his slightly sweaty hair and pushed him towards the bathroom. Izuku relaxed under the hot water, letting his muscles lose all tension. He was sore and bruised, but it didn't really hurt. He tilted his head back and let the water wash over his face, scrunching his eyes closed as he did. Tony's shower was filled with a multitude of hair products. She had afro-textured hair and she refused to let Izuku use a simple drugstore shampoo. "I refuse to let you walk around with chronically frizzy hair, no child under my care with have an undefined curl," she had said as she pushed various bottles into his arms. Izuku couldn't care less, but he had to admit, his hair was much softer since she had started to help him care for it. Hisashi never cared enough to take the time to make sure his son was cared for beyond the basics. Izuku finished up his shower, fully drying off before pulling on the PJs that Tony left outside of the bathroom door for him. He stepped out once fully dressed, signing a quick goodnight to Tony. He stepped into his room and crawled under his blankets, drifting to sleep. A gunshot fired off in the distance. This was New York City. There was always gunfire, so it was nothing to worry about. Mr. Angel was silent as he washed the blood off of Izuku. The small boy hadn't said anything since Mr. Purple's blood had painted his face. Mr. Angel was used to the carnage, Izuku wasn't. A washcloth was dipped into warm, soapy water. Izuku watched the droplets track down Mr. Angel's hands and forearms as he gently wiped the blood and gore away. He set the cloth aside once Izuku's face was clear. "All right, little one, the blood's gone. I want you to take those clothes off and take a shower. All of the blood is gone, so you are not going to scrub your skin. I know you feel icky right now, but you aren't going to hurt yourself by trying to get clean. Do you understand me?" Izuku didn't answer. He continued to stare at the droplets of water that hung off of Mr. Angel's hands. A pink-tinted drop fell. "Izuku, I need you to give me an answer. I need you to acknowledge what I've said." Izuku nodded slowly. "I won't scrub." He smiled weakly. "Good boy. I'll be back in 20 minutes with new clothes for you, all right? After that, I'll get you some more breakfast." He didn't wait for a response. He knew Izuku wouldn't give him one. Mr. Angel stood up from his position slowly and made his way to the door of the bathroom, pausing briefly in the doorway to look at Izuku one last time before disappearing from the small boy's view. Once Mr. Angel was gone, Izuku set about the slow task of cleaning himself up. He was in Mr. Angel's bathroom, so he wasn't familiar with any of the products. Identical bottles from a company Izuku couldn't even hope to pronounce decorated the shower. Turning on the water was simple enough as it was the same as in his bathroom. An overwhelming pressure started to claw at his eyes, the reality of the horror he had just witnessed hitting the boy. The warm water washed over his small body, flushing away any remaining feelings of impurity. There was no blood to scrub away as Mr. Angel had already washed it away. Izuku didn't like blood and he didn't like to cry. His father always said that only weak people cried. He picked up a bottle that he assumed was shampoo. It smelled faintly of sandalwood and vanilla. He poured some into his hands and worked his curls into a lather. The scent of the shampoo flooded his senses, erasing the lingering smell of pancakes and gunpowder. As promised, Izuku didn't scrub. When the tears came, it wasn't unexpected, but it was despised. Just this once, Izuku allowed himself to succumb to the weakness. "All right, Konahito, if you're going to be vigilante ing with me, you'll need a name." It should be something that doesn't fully reveal your quirk, but it's fine if it hints at it. Kinda like your name? Exactly. Spectrum can be interpreted as a lot of things, which is good for throwing others off. Throwing others off as to what your quirk is especially important when you don't have a combat-based quirk. Seeing the full electromagnetic spectrum is great, but it doesn't help when someone holds a gun to your head, Tony said as she started to pull her gear on. Got any ideas? The small boy was pulling on his own gear as she asked. His face scrunched up as he thought it over. He shook his head after a few moments. That's okay. Radiohead is pretty good at names. He helped me pick out mine when I first started. Tony pulled her helmet on. Come on, kiddo, time to head out. Izuku's parkour had improved at an almost exponential rate. He was still a scrawny little kid, but he was able to keep up with Tony easily. He even may have been faster than her, but she didn't want him to get too cocky. Running along the rooftops at night was, despite what many would suspect, relaxing. There were no people crowding about, noise was minimal, and the only light came from streetlights and signs. Shadows milled around through the night, but Izuku had come to trust them. A shadow danced across the roof that they usually met Radiohead on. Spectrum had introduced the two of them a few weeks earlier, and they had hit it off immediately. Given the nature of his quirk, Radiohead knew quite a large range of music and was always able to give Izuku good recommendations. Shimon, good to see you again, Spectrum said as she landed on the roof. Radiohead looked over. Excuse you, do you not see the headphones? It's Radiohead right now. His outfit was relatively simple, loose-fitting black pants and a red shirt under a leather jacket. On his head, he wore his mentioned headphones. I saw them, I just didn't care. She took a seat next to him. Besides, you're calling more attention to yourself with those jerking motions you call dancing. He gasped in offense. I did not cut my Sabbath short for you to insult me. I'm ignoring you now. Anyway, it's good to see you, Izuku. Izuku simply held his hand out for a fist bump, one which Radiohead returned happily. Culo grosero, did you bring what I asked you to? Radiohead audibly rolled his eyes. Yes, mother, I did, he said as he reached into one of his many pockets. He pulled out a lock of hair. Spectrum said you can use any form of DNA for your quirk. I figured hair was the more palatable option. Spectrum nodded her thanks as she took the lock. Wordlessly, she pulled out a bracelet and wove the hair between the leather cords. There we go, she said as she tied the bracelet around Izuku's wrist. 3? Oh geez, that's weird. I hear you, buddy, loud and clear. Spectrum nodded in satisfaction. Now he'll be in constant contact with both of us. He can hear all of your current thoughts, but he usually blocks it out unless he needs to tell you something or you think his name. Think his name and he'll start listening again. Being able to block out others' thoughts came from a lot of practice and Izuku's desire to stop hearing every earworm that Tony had. Unlike Tony, he wasn't able to hum the song until it disappeared. Anyway, Izuku and I wanted your opinion on what his name should be. Radiohead pursed his lips as he thought. What about something like cerebrum? It's the thought center of the brain. The name might make people think he has an intelligence quirk or something. Spectrum sighed. I hate how easily this comes to you. She turned to Izuku. From here on out, your cerebrum. Sound good? The small boy nodded excitedly, happy to officially have a vigilante name. Welcome, it's a pleasure to officially make your acquaintance, Mr. Angel said as he welcomed a group into the room where Izuku had been first made aware of his father's crimes. I look forward to our new alliance. Please, take a seat. My men should bring out drinks for us soon. Izuku watched as each man took a seat. They were all in coordinating outfits which made them look put together on the outside, but looking closer revealed that most of their clothing didn't fit and was poor quality. They were clearly trying to make a good impression, but just fell short. It's a pleasure to finally meet you in person, Angel. I hope we're able to live up to your expectations, a man with blue hair said. I'm Jonathan and I'm in charge of this crew. But I wasn't aware that a child would be sitting in on our meeting. Oh, don't mind him, it's bring your kid to work day, Mr. Angel said with an easy smile, lying through his teeth. I'm joking, poor kiddo was sent home from school early because he wasn't feeling too good. I'm looking after him while his father is out doing his work. Jonathan nodded. That's very kind of you. He smiled and offered Izuku a hand. It's a pleasure to meet you, buddy. Izuku reached and shook Jonathan's much larger hand. Thankfully, Jonathan appeared to not know what lotion was. The skin on his hands was dry and cracked. Izuku was able to get the man's skin under his nails easily with a single pass. He shook out his hand lightly. Does he talk or? Oh no. He's been mute his entire life. Mr. Angel reached over and ruffled Izuku's hair. His father isn't comfortable with anyone outside of my organization knowing his name, so you can call him Whisper. Mr. Angel, I got it. The only indication he gave of hearing Izuku was quirking his lips slightly. Good boy, keep me updated throughout the conversation. Anything that seems out of the ordinary, tell me. Izuku knew better than to nod. Mr. Angel and Mr. Purple had taught him how to school his expression and give nothing away. Izuku's connection to the various men in the room couldn't be given away. Mr. Angel cleared his throat lightly, breaking the awkward silence. Anyway, let's discuss the terms of our agreement. In exchange for being able to sell on our territory, you will give us 30% of your earnings. In exchange for selling on our territory, you promise to not sell any and all forms of trigger. Weapons and other drags are fine, but trigger is strictly prohibited. The hell, I knew this guy would be a stickler, but 30% off the bat? I can't mess up this deal, but he'll run us dry before we can make a profit. Could we wait a month or two for the first payment? We need to establish ourselves in their area before we can delve out earnings, Jonathan said. It wasn't unreasonable, everyone in the room knew it. You'll get 1 month. After that, expect the 30% bi-weekly. I'll send a courier to you when it's due. If a payment is late, you'll have to deal with my men. Does that sound good? Jonathan nodded. And do know I am dead serious about trigger. If you try to sell that at all, you will be dealt with. Severely. Mr. Angel leant in close as he spoke. I don't need that getting out into my streets. Why are you so against trigger, if you don't mind me asking? Guns are easily controlled. You load it, aim, and fire. Casualties are easily estimated. Trigger? You never know. If a single thing is wrong with a dose, the buyer turns into a rampaging monster without inhibitions. The cost of trigger is greater than the profit. Mr. Angel sat back. Death doesn't faze me, but that doesn't mean I enjoy needless casualties. At least that's one thing we can agree on. Seems like this guy isn't as horrible as Mateo's men said. Jonathan nodded. Respectable. I'll make sure my men keep an eye out for trigger. If we notice anything, you'll be the first to know. Mr. Angel, he's telling the truth. He's been genuine the entire time. Mr. Angel smiled broadly. I'm glad you're being so cooperative. I think this partnership will be lovely. Feel free to relax here for a bit. A few of my other men will go over details with you. I'm afraid I have an appointment to keep with Little Whisper. Of course, thank you for having us, Angel. It was pleasure meeting you, Whisper. Jonathan had a small smile. Mr. Angel stood and made his way out, Izuku following closely behind as his shadow. They had many more meetings to deal with, all of which required Izuku to secretly screen those involved. Mr. Angel wasn't afraid to put the boy to use now that he was under his control. Izuku didn't really mind as it was all good practice. Mr. Angel made sure to keep Izuku away from any gore for a while, just so the small boy could recover mentally. Mr. Purple was almost back to his previous health. His stitches had long since been removed. All right, little one, same procedure as the last meeting. Keep me updated on anything important or suspicious. I aim for us to be done before dinner. You can pick what we eat considering how well you've been doing lately, Mr. Angel said as he led the small boy out of the building and into a waiting car. The fill-in bodyguard drove the two of them to their next appointment. Izuku missed Mr. Purple's silent presence. What do you hear, Radiohead? Spectrum as she hovered over his shoulder. She kept lookout, utilizing her infrared vision to track their targets through body heat. 1 second. Radiohead's face was screwed up in concentration. I've locked onto the right frequency. He fell silent again. Izuku tuned into Radiohead's thoughts as he listened. Radiohead was able to lock onto radio frequencies and listen to whatever was being broadcasted. Through a lot of trial and error, he was able to lock onto the frequencies of the phones of his targets. That being said, listening to Radiohead's thoughts was always interesting. Some new audio STMLTN was always popping in and out. It was a bit overwhelming at first, but Izuku quickly adjusted. Izuku relayed everything word for word to Spectrum as Radiohead concentrated on the conversations being held. Man number 1. No, you guys don't understand. My new guy is totally legit. He can get us 5 cases of trigger for half of the normal price. Man number 2. Half price? I don't trust that sheet. What's the quality like? Woman, yeah, I don't want sheet quality. No one will buy sheet. Man number 1. Quality. I swear. My guy is part of the Silver Phantoms. Trust me, he's legit. Woman, Silver Phantoms? Pauses and whistles lowly. Alright, I'm listening. I thought Angel didn't deal in trigger though. Man number 1. My guy does. Does it under Angel's nose. He hides it in. What do you say? Want in? Man number 2. Hell yeah. Tell your guy I'm in. Who's he? Man number 1. That's the thing. He's one of Angel's. Hasn't told me his name, he's secretive like that. I've seen him around Angel all the time though. Woman, well sheet. What does he look like? Some of those Sil dash. Go to my favorite bar. I might know him. Man number 1. He's Asian, no idea what country he's from though. Curly black hair and some freckles. Sheet. Spectrum looked over at Izuku, her displeasure almost tangible in the air. That's your dad, isn't it? Izuku nodded simply. He was disappointed in his father, but not surprised. Mr. Angel had always made his displeasure for Trigger clear. He expected those around him to share the same beliefs. His father dealing in Trigger was a big sign that he wasn't quite as loyal to the Silver Phantoms as Izuku initially thought. His father had never been an honorable man. Woman, hasn't he got enough money? Why is he dealing in Trigger? Man number 1. Hell if I know, he doesn't gossip to me, or on the streets. Signal lost. Mr. Angel? Can I talk to you? Tony didn't like to admit her weaknesses, but she knew that she had no chance of being able to take care of Hisashi's new dealings. The only one within reach that potentially had enough influence to put out the fire that was starting to spread was Angel. Of course, little one, take a seat. Mr. Angel set aside a large stack of papers he had been writing on. What's on your mind? Izuku took a seat across from Mr. Angel. It's about my dad. Spectrum told me I should tell you about it. Mr. Angel and Spectrum lived in opposition to each other. They loathed to acknowledge the existence of the other and avoided it whenever possible. Spectrum wanted to tear Mr. Angel down, but she couldn't for fear of Izuku being taken away by Hisashi before justice could be served. Mr. Angel wanted to end Spectrum's vigilante career but was unable to for fear of her releasing all information she had on him. He also had to grudgingly admit that she was the best option to raise Izuku as Hisashi was well established as a bad father in most regards. Mr. Angel straightened in his seat and schooled his expression. I'm all ears. What is it? Izuku worried at his bottom lip. My dad. Spectrum and I have reason to believe he's dealing in Trigger. Mr. Angel, as perfectly composed as he normally is, broke at that moment. He what? His rage was barely contained, boiling to the surface. He's dealing in Trigger. We overheard a group talking about getting Trigger through someone in the Silver Phantoms. He never gave them his name, but they described him as Asian with freckles and black curly hair. Izuku, I need you to leave. Right now. Send Mr. Purple in on your way out, he said as his head dropped into his shaking hands. Go to your room and stay there. I need to deal with this. Izuku nodded and quickly stood. He wanted to say something, but he knew that Mr. Angel didn't want to lose his temper in front of the small boy. Izuku quickly left the room, gesturing for Mr. Purple to enter from his position outside of the door. As he left, crashing, slamming, and screaming could be heard from Mr. Angel's office. He had never heard Mr. Angel raise his voice before. Izuku wasn't sure what to feel or think when he heard Mr. Angel scream before he disappeared into his room. Hisashi is a dead man. Mark my words. Izuku was unsure as he stood in front of Tony's door. He had always known that Tony and Angel didn't like each other. They had never met in person before, and yet he knew that they were fundamentally different. She was a vigilante that was willing to get her hands a little dirty to keep the streets safe. He was a criminal lord with an eclectic set of morals that dared anyone to cross him. "This it, little one?" Angel asked in a soft voice. Unlike his normal self, his clothes were wrinkled and rumpled. His silver hair lay in damp, messy locks on his forehead. Izuku nodded. He had a key to Tony's apartment, but he figured that she should have some sort of warning before springing a criminal lord and his bodyguard on her. He slowly reached his hand up and rapped at the warped, wooden door frame. 1 minute. The three heard from deep within the apartment. There was a faint thudding as someone, presumably Tony, made their way to the door. She opened the door slightly, peering through the crack before opening it wider. "Konehito? I thought you were supposed," she trailed off as she took sight of Angel and Mr. Purple. Angel gave her a smile that was a strange mixture between sheepish and strained. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you in person, Spectrum, or should I say Tony?" "Actually, to you, it's Antonella," Tony said. She sighed softly and opened the door wider. "Come in, I don't need my neighbors seeing you too." "I am glad to see you though, Izuku." Izuku led the two larger men into the apartment. He pulled his shoes off once he was through the door, pausing to make sure the other two did as well. Angel, while he was a criminal mastermind, he knew better than to wear his dirty shoes in Tony's house. Mr. Purple followed suit after being prompted by Angel. He obviously wasn't happy about it though. "Now, why the F are you two here?" "I'll never complain about seeing Izuku when it's not my time to see him, but I will always complain about having to see Hisashi's co-workers." Angel pulled a face. "I would prefer to not be associated with that man anymore." He took a seat on the colorful, threadbare couch. Mr. Purple took a seat next to him. "I'm here in regard to the information you just recently found out about Hisashi Midoriya." Tony nodded as she took a seat in her favorite armchair. Her knees were pulled up to her chest and she picked up a steaming mug from the coffee table next to her. "I was hoping this house call would be about something else, but yeah, I expected this." She blew on her drink lightly before taking a small, tentative sip. Izuku looked around at the three adults, silently searching for a seat. Given the severity of the discussion, he had wanted to sit on even ground with them. Instead, the small boy was left to sit in a neon green beanbag chair, one that was so flat that his head didn't even come past the armrest of the couch. He huffed slightly at how childish he must have appeared. Angel strained to keep a straight face as he watched the small boy's dilemma. Tony wasn't much better in hiding her laughter. "It's all right, little one, we can barely even see you down there. Can't judge what you can't see." Izuku swatted at Angel's knee. "I'm only down here because you're sitting in my spot." "Oh my, I'm sitting in your spot? What a grievous crime. I'll make sure to repent when I go to church this Sunday." Tony snorted into her tea, which resulted in it splashing on her. Aye. Myrda, that's hot. Anyway, quit teasing him. We have to actually discuss what we're doing about Hisashi." Angel nodded and sat up straighter. "Well, my initial plan was to just silence him the easy way, but Mr. Purple made the good point that he likely has people working with him. People fear and respect him. It wouldn't be hard for him to get a loyal team even if he isn't loyal." Despite being on the side of the heroes, Tony didn't seem too appalled at the fact that Angel just admitted to planning on murdering Hisashi. "Anyway, I can't investigate my own men. Hisashi would pick up on it too quickly and they could scatter. I need you and your vigilante buddies to investigate them for me. I can give you a schedule with all of their planned movements. I need you to see how deeply this reaches into the Silver Phantoms." "So, I'm doing all of your dirty work?" Not happening. "Antonella, please. If he has roots spread throughout my phantoms, then there's nothing I can do to stop him." Izuku had never heard Angel plead sincerely before. He was truly desperate to get to the bottom of this. "Fine, I'll see what I can find. I should have something for you by the next time you have Izuku. I'll keep the actual evidence, but I'll have Izuku tell you." The one perk to Izuku's quirk was that you never needed to worry about being overheard. "I expect the same in return. If you find something out, tell me." Angel nodded. Of course, I wouldn't expect anything else. Angel reached into a pocket on the inside of his suit. He pulled out a small, flip phone. Here, it's untraceable. Only use it to communicate with me. I have a similar phone. Try to reserve it for emergencies. Tony took the phone silently and set it on the coffee table. With the schedule you give me, I'll bust one or two of the deals. You do know that, right? Yeah, I expected that. Just keep it to a normal amount, all right? Too much and they'll suspect inside information. Too little and they'll think something is up. I'm not an amateur, don't worry. She set her empty cup down with a soft thud. Izuku looked over at Mr. Purple who, as normal, had remained silent for the conversation. Izuku wanted to gauge his own thoughts on the situation. His face appeared as if it were carved out of amethyst. There were no signs or indications as to what he thought. All Izuku could assume is that his loyalty and love for Angel ran deeper than any feelings of attachment he possibly had for the Silver Phantoms. Izuku wouldn't be surprised if that were the case. But there is one thing that we need to figure out before we take Fire Breath down. Who gets Izuku? Angel leaned forward in his seat. Well, I think I'm the obvious choice. I can give him all of the time he needs and I have more than enough money to pay for any possible expenses. I love children and I'm good with them. Yeah, well, I've known him longer. I've known him since his mother died, years longer than you. I bet you don't even know the first thing about him. As they say, try me beach, Angel grinned in a good-natured way. What's his favorite fruit? Painfully easy. Pears. Cats or dogs? He loves both, but he prefers dogs. Tony narrowed her eyes and nodded a bit. You're good, I'll give you that. If you get this next question right, then I might consider letting you stay in his life. What's his natural hair color? Angel looked like he wanted to retort, but paused and frowned. It's not white? I thought his hair was naturally white. Tony smiled smugly. His hair is naturally dark green. Tony pulled out her phone and scrolled through her photo album. See? They showed the two men a picture of a much younger Izuku with a head full of green curls. All right, I'll accept defeat on that question. Angel looked over at Izuku, deeply analyzing his very white curls. Why does he have white hair now? My mom had green hair like mine. Dad didn't like seeing my hair because it reminded him of my mom. He took me to a hairstylist that has a permanent hair color changing quirk. His wife died, and his way of coping was changing how his son looked. Angel sassed, still frowning slightly. Izuku shrugged. Never said he was good at parenting, much less good with emotions. Angel shook his head slowly. I swear, the more I learn about that man, the more I hate him. Well, let it be known that I think you look super cool with both hair colors. Anyway, he said as he stood up, I suppose we should get back. Hisashi will be coming back from an errand within an hour or so and I don't want him asking questions if we get back after he does. Izuku and Mr. Purple stood up after him. The three made their way to the door, Tony trailing behind. See you all later, I'll give you any updates that arise. Stay safe. Angel smiled softly. You do the same, Tony. Angel turned and led the way out of the old apartment building. As the three left into the night, Tony could only feel an overwhelming sense of dread. Fear for the future reached up through her stomach and held her throat in an iron grip. Hisashi only caused pain, that she knew for a fact. There was no avoiding the future or the pain. All she could do was wait. Izuku had been told to act normal around his father. The slightest change in his behavior could set the intelligent man off. While Izuku was normally very good at doing what he was told, he couldn't help his curiosity. So, on the one day of the week that he actually stayed in his father's apartment, he snooped. His father never explicitly gave Izuku rules to follow, most were implied. The biggest rule was that Izuku was never to go into his father's office. Hisashi always said he had important work documents that he stored in there, ones that he didn't want to risk being ruined by the young boy. Izuku knew this was a lie. Hisashi knew that Izuku knew, but he didn't care. Another rule that Hisashi had was that Izuku wasn't allowed to touch him. One may assume that Hisashi just wasn't a touchy-feely kind of person, but that wasn't true. When Inko had been alive, he had been quick to shower her in hugs, kisses, and caresses whenever possible. So no, it wasn't that Hisashi was touch-averse. What Hisashi was distrustful. He didn't even trust his own son, likely because he knew that Tony and Angel were more parents than he ever was. Izuku's loyalty to Hisashi was superficial at best, a relationship that was only held together by the questionable title of family and DNA. Izuku couldn't remember the last time that his father had said 3 little words to him. "I love you" wasn't said or even implied. There were no caring gestures, just harshly spoken whispers and fake smiles. There was no sense of shame keeping Izuku from breaking his father's unspoken rules when he wasn't there to witness, so Izuku opened the door. He slowly stepped inside, nervous of an unseen flame burning him. It was neat and orderly, just like the rest of the house. There wasn't a single thread out of place, everything was cleaned down to the smallest nook. It was unnervingly quiet as Izuku stepped toward his father's desk. The floors were covered in a soft carpet that buried any and all sound. Even the drawers on the desk were silent as they were opened. The papers inside were crisp and neat, there were no ink or coffee stains to be found. There wasn't a single speck of dust or a single strand of hair to be found anywhere. What Izuku found in the drawer wasn't documents about drags or weapons. It wasn't financial statements. It wasn't anything that openly connected his father to any evildoing he had committed. Instead, he found papers documenting his father's correspondence with a man named Jiren. Another thing, the papers were all in Japanese. Despite being fully Japanese, Izuku's reading skills weren't the best. His father only spoke Japanese with him when they were home together, or when he wanted to tell his son something in public without worrying about eavesdroppers. Reading-wise, Izuku didn't have many opportunities to practice. Izuku quickly looked around before pulling out his phone. He took careful pictures of every single letter that the 2 men had exchanged. Izuku had never been so careful before in his life. He made sure that every paper remained crisp and in order. Altogether, there were 26 letters that were written in Japanese. 16 were from Jiren. The remaining 10 letters were from someone with the last name Shigaraki. Shigaraki's letters were often stapled to Jiren's, so it was safe to assume they associated with each other. If only he had the letters his father wrote. Izuku replaced the letters once he took a picture of each. He flipped through the pictures, just to make sure that the kanji were legible enough so he could translate it later. Satisfied with the results, he began to search the rest of the room. He stopped on occasion to take pictures, but there wasn't anything as interesting as the Jiren letters. Tony and Angel would have both been disappointed in him. With how silent the apartment was, he should have heard the front door open. With how silent the apartment was, he should have heard the rustling of a coat being taken off. What Izuku did hear was the opening of the office door. Izuku froze in place, his eyes widening. He wasn't sure what exactly Hisashi would do to him as he had never disobeyed his father so openly before. The doorknob turned and the door swung open. A multitude of emotions flashed across Hisashi's face as he took in the sight of his young son, standing behind his desk. His face settled into a steely, silent anger. "Izuku, explain." Izuku had enough practice at lying from Angel's lessons to school his face to hide his fear. "Sorry, I know I'm not allowed in here. My teacher asked me if I got a form signed by you, but I couldn't remember if I gave it to you or not. I didn't want to bother you if you already signed it, so I just thought I would peek in here. I must have forgotten to give you the form. I'll make sure to grab a copy tomorrow." Izuku may have been good at lying in the moment, but Hisashi's entire life was built on deception and half-truths. Hisashi worked his jaw back and forth before shaking his head. "Fine. Get the paper to me tomorrow and I'll sign it. In the future, wait for me to get home or text me. I have important papers in here that I can't have you messing around in. Got it?" Izuku nodded quickly, his curls bouncing as he did. "Good. Now get out. Finish your homework. I'll get started on dinner in a few minutes." Izuku stumbled around the desk in his hurry to leave. His eyes were lowered to the ground, a small, proud smile graced his face. What Izuku didn't see behind his back were the wisps of smoke curling from his father's lips. What he didn't see were the obsidian eyes, sharp enough to cut glass, glaring daggers at his son's back. The king of lies is experienced enough to know when he's being lied to. Izuku, I am so unbelievably angry and disappointed in you. I explicitly told you not to do anything that would raise your father's suspicion. I understand that you wanted to help, but it means nothing if your father catches on before we can make our move, Angel said as he held his head in his hands. His knuckles were white as he flexed his hands. I'm sorry. Are you sorry? Do you actually feel bad? Or are you just sorry that you got caught? Izuku looked down at his shoes, rightfully cowed. Izuku had initially wanted to hide his endeavors from Angel, but the guilt had eaten at the small boy. He had never directly disobeyed Angel before, and he couldn't handle the silent pressure. That's what I thought. Go to your room for now. Izuku nodded and silently padded out of Angel's office. He kept his head down as he passed Mr. Purple. He slipped into his room, the door closing with a soft click. He did feel bad, truly, but he also felt as if he were justified in his actions. He got letters and names, which was more than what they previously had. Maybe if I get something useful out of these, maybe Mr. Angel won't be so angry. So, Izuku sat at his desk and wrote. Are you sure it's okay for us to crash this deal? I thought Angel said we should avoid Hisashi. It's more suspicious for us not to. We usually break up one deal every 2 weeks or so. We need to keep appearances up, Spectrum said as she shifted on the roof next to Radiohead. This deal is supposed to be small, but Hisashi is here. That means he may have something extra in this. Why else would he be here? Good point, but why exactly are we trusting Angel now? His face was screwed in concentration as he tried to lock onto the radio frequencies nearest to the men. I don't trust Angel on principle, but I have to trust him when it comes to Izuku. He wants what's best for him, I have to respect him for that. Spectrum didn't blink as she watched the men. Despite the darkness, she was able to see each man perfectly in infrared. There's 8 men. 3 are silver phantoms, 1 is Hisashi and the other 2 are likely low-ranking couriers. The other 5 men look to be of average build, only 1 has visible mutations. Radiohead didn't reply as he was busy typing everything he heard into a screen on his inner arm. Without Izuku with them, Spectrum and Radiohead were unable to instantaneously share what they saw and heard. Having Izuku there would have made things easier, but he was grounded by Angel. A grounding that Spectrum couldn't help but agree with. Izuku's safety came before anything else. That was certain. Having him here for this, having him see his father out here would only lead to problems. Hisashi could never know that Izuku did vigilante work with Spectrum, it would only lead to the boy being taken away. They're moving. Do you still have the connection? Radiohead nodded. They're about to do the swap. Hisashi hasn't said anything yet, it's mostly been the underlings. Still not sure what exactly they're exchanging. Angel said he's giving them guns in exchange for body armor, high-grade stuff. I don't know what's being traded under the table though. Spectrum led Radiohead away from their current roof, onto a new one that was closer to the deal. They were lower so that they could jump into action when it was time. A van just pulled up. They're starting to unload the back. I think they're unloading the armor, Spectrum said, describing everything that she saw. A pickup truck just pulled up. Should we move in or wait longer? They're still talking. Spectrum looked over the scene before them as she thought. The ideal outcome would be stopping the deal and leaving the men for the police, but Hisashi couldn't be caught, not yet. If they caught him now, they would never know the full extent of the operation. We'll let them exchange and drive away. You tail Hisashi and his men, listen in to what they say. I'll take down the other 5. Radiohead nodded. Aye, boss. If anyone else had said they would take 3 heavily armed men by themselves, Radiohead would have been tentative to agree, but this was Spectrum. She was by far one of the most competent fighters he had met that had a non-combat quirk. Even if she didn't win the fight, she would come out alive, which was all that was needed at times. Rendezvous at our normal place? She nodded. Keep your earpiece on, stay safe. I was planning on doing that anyway, Radiohead said as he stood up, staying low so as not to be spotted. He moved to the edge of the building. Don't die, and with that being said, he disappeared over the edge. Into the shadows. Spectrum huffed softly as her friend and partner disappeared. She kept her eyes on the men in front of her. No one would be escaping her all-seeing eyes. Losing sight of someone was a death sentence. It always was in this line of work. Despite this being a simple operation, she felt as if her future depended on her success here. She often felt this way, so she tried to push it from her mind. The two groups eventually finished exchanging their goods and turned towards their respective cars. Spectrum crept along the room, trying to stay as close as possible to the group of 5 men as possible. Thankfully, neither group seemed to be very vigilant. They were far too arrogant to believe that someone was watching them, too proud to think that someone could stop them. Hisashi was the first to drive away. Spectrum slid down the fire escape to an alley below. She went as fast as possible while still making decisive movements. It was moments like this that she was glad she spent so much on the protective gear incorporated in her costume. She reached into one of the numerous pouches on her utility belt. She pulled out a handful of caltrops and peered out of the alley. The car of men was just starting to pull away. Here goes nothing. She threw the caltrops into the middle of the street, scattering them about so they couldn't be avoided. With how dark it was, she was certain they hadn't even seen them while they were airborne. She sunk back into the shadows, waiting for the fly to enter the trap she spun. The truck drove into her view, speeding over the unseen caltrops. The truck's tires began to hiss and pop. Sparks flew as the metal rims grated against the asphalt. Faint shouts of annoyance could be heard from within the car. A man with a distinctive wolfish appearance was the first to exit the car, the driver following soon after. "Tires are popped, boss," the wolf growled out. His voice was deep and as rough as gravel. Not by mistake either. The driver kicked one of the deflated tires in irritation. "Why the F did I bring you along then? You're supposed to be some great hunter, smell out the trouble before it appears." He put his hands up in surrender. His hands were clearly warped from his quirk, thick and wicked claws at the end of each finger. "No one was close by during the trade, I swear. If they were there, they must have been downwind. I can smell real good, but even I can't find anything downwind." Boss whacked the back of Wolf's head, which was quite comical to watch as Wolf was a solid foot taller and built of pure muscle. "Just find the fucker now. Where are they hiding?" Wolf raised his nose to the air and sniffed around. He homed in on Spectrum, who was still hiding in the shadows of the alley. Sadly, the strong scent of rotting garbage and urine wasn't enough to hide her smell. "There," he said as he pointed a clawed finger towards the vigilante. "What are you waiting for?" Boss asked as he drew his gun. "Go fetch." With a snarl, Wolf started to stalk his way forward. Before he could make his attack, Spectrum grabbed a smoke grenade from her utility belt. Pulling the pin, she threw it between the two men. A thick smoke soon filled the street, obscuring everyone's sight. Everyone except for Spectrum, as she had the gift of infrared vision. Boss fired off a few shots, all of them missing her by a few feet. "FF dash," he said, coughing roughly. "Where the F are they? Get them." Wolf scratched at his nose roughly and coughed. "You can't," he hacked. "Too much smoke." His eyes were watering freely, tears falling unchecked. Silently, Spectrum ran through the smoke and slammed into Boss. His body crashed against the side of the truck, his head cracking the glass. As she took a step back, he crumpled to the ground, as if he was a marionette with cut strings. "Looking for me?" Wolf focused in on her. He still wasn't able to smell her, but he could hear her and see the faint outline of her body through the smoke. "You beach." He lunged forward, his claws raised to swipe at her. Before he could make contact, she held up her baton to block the strike. It shattered. The pieces of the baton fell from her hands. Splinters and shards were embedded in Wolf's palm, making his snarl and snap his jaws at her. "I take it you're not a stick-loving kind of dog," Spectrum joked flatly and kicked at his kneecaps. He stumbled back out her range, his focus breaking from her long enough for her to disappear into the smoke and shadows again. 2 more men exited the truck, running to Wolf's side. "What the hell's going on?" one asked. Neither had been able to see what happened as the smoke blocked everything. All they had heard was the crashing and crunching from Boss breaking the glass. "Some beach vigilante," Wolf blew sharply out of his nose, trying to clear it so he could smell again. He swung his head around before locking in on her again. She's at our 2 o'clock. She's quick. Before Wolf could take a step forward or the other two men could try and act against her, she pulled out her bolus and whipped it around her head. Once, twice, thrice. She launched it low into the night, quickly tangling around Wolf's ankles. He wasn't able to catch himself as he fell, hitting the pavement hard. Don't help me. Get her. Wolf reached down and made quick work of the bolus. After tugging and ripping, his claws quickly shredded the ropes. They fell into a pile around his feet. She's to your right. Before either man could react, she kicked the back of one man's knees. As he fell, she pulled his gun from his hand and pistol whipped the back of his head. He was unconscious before he even hit the ground. Unseen by everyone, the fifth man exited the truck. He peeked up from behind the hood of the truck. He had no visible weapon, but that was no reason to dismiss him. He spat a mouthful of water at the unsuspecting vigilante, hitting her right shoulder and arm. She didn't even notice as the water hit her. What she did notice was the smoking and sizzling erupting across her costume. Mierda! She drew a knife. Joder! As quickly as possible, she the fabric away at the shoulder. Maldita sea! As she started to pull the tainted and melting sleeve off, the only remaining man barring Mr. Acid Spit grabbed her by the throat and tackled her to the ground. He straddled her hips and squeezed firmly. Black dots started to appear in her vision. As she fell, her knife scattered just out of reach and her sleeve was still smoking on her arm. The acid began to eat at her skin. The knife was out of reach, but the shattered baton wasn't. Black began to take over everything she saw. She reached over and felt blindly, desperate for anything to use as a weapon. Her hand closed around the baton. Her strangler never noticed. With all of the strength she could muster, she stabbed the splintered end of the baton into his forearm. With a scream of pain, the pressure around her neck disappeared. She took in a desperate and much-needed lungful of air. She grabbed the shoulders of her attempted murderer and smashed his face into her tactical mask. A smudge of blood was left behind as he fell aside lifelessly. With him finally off, Spectrum ripped the remains of her sleeve off. Her skin underneath was taut and screaming in pain, but she had no time to think about her acid burns. Mr. Acid Spit popped up once again from behind the truck. She grabbed the back of Wolf's collar, who was just starting to get up. She pushed him into the stream of acid, shielding herself easily behind his massive frame. She tried to ignore his screams. It appeared that Wolf was nearing the end of his fight anyway, as he quickly fell unconscious from the pain. Spectrum shoved his body onto the hood of the truck to avoid getting trapped underneath him. She turned her attention to Mr. Acid Spit, the only one remaining in the fight. She pushed her pain from her mind and made her around the truck to where he was cowering, desperately trying to take in enough water to continue his fight. As he saw her, he sprayed her chest with what little acid he had in his mouth. Without hesitation, she lifted up her boot and brought it down on top of his head. He fell back, unconscious. Not without haste, she picked up her knife once again and cut away the body of her jumpsuit. Thankfully, only mild burns could be found on her abdomen. She tossed the ruined cloth to the ground and looked around at the surrounding scene. She looked at the 5 men. Mr. Acid Spit was out. Wolf was out. Strangler was out. She prayed that he wasn't dead. Pistol Whip was definitely out. She turned towards the side of the truck where Boss had gone down. She walked towards him and squatted down so that she was level with his face. She slapped him across the face. Boss jolted awake. A small trail of blood was leaking from the corner of his mouth. You're a thing devil. His voice was breathy and pained. Now, you are going to tell me what I want to know, Spectrum said as she tilted his chin up. Who is Hisashi's supplier? Boss rightfully looked a mixture between scared and angry. Supplier for what? Trigger. I have no idea, man, and I don't care. I'm just in charge of trades, I don't know details. Spectrum hummed softly. Yeah, I'm not buying it. She released his chin, letting his head fall down towards his chest. With her hands free, she twisted his arm roughly. I'm not a hero, I'm not scared to get my hands a little dirty, especially when it comes to this. I'm sure your buddies can attest to that. I swear. I don't know anything. So, if I look in the back of the truck, I won't find any trigger? If I find some back there and find out you're lying, then I might accidentally spill some of your buddy's spit on you. You know, the one with acid spit. Spectrum stood and walked towards the bed of the truck. Okay. You're effing crazy, I swear, he swore softly under his breath. Hisashi gets the trigger from some fuckers that wear masquerade masks, dramatic little FS. You got a name for them? He began to shake his head, but stopped once he was hit by the pain and dizziness. I swear I don't, I try to avoid them. They're arrogant BSTs. And yet you associate with Hisashi? Spectrum sounded unimpressed, likely because she was. He's about as arrogant as someone can be. Whatever, how often do you get trigger from him? Once every 2 weeks at most. There's not a big market for the stuff, but those that want it are willing to pay whatever necessary. Spectrum nodded. Good boy, she said as she began to grab her scattered weapons. She took care to pick up everything that could possibly have her DNA. Every baton splinter, every caltrip, every scrap of rope from her bolus. With extra caution and care, she picked up the scraps from her costume that were almost done smoking. She grabbed Strangler's phone and dialed the police. She cleared her throat softly and raised the pitch of her voice. Excuse me? 911? Please send help. There's a bunch of injured men in the middle of Oakland Avenue across from the liquor shop. I think one M might be dead. Please come quick. Hanging up the phone, she looked back at the scattered men. She tossed the phone back toward Strangler and limped off into the night. At this rate, I think we'll be able to turn this over to the police in a month or two, Angel said as he looked up from all of the intel that Tony had accumulated. What you have mixed with my own account will be more than enough to put Hisashi for a good while. Tony nodded. I'm guessing we'll mostly be working on finding his connections and underlings then? Angel hummed in confirmation. Mr. Purple and I have a good start, but it'll still take some time. I'm hoping to have Izuku help me find everyone. I'll find the necessary evidence once I have the names. Tony gathered her notes up and unplugged her thumb drive from Angel's computer. You focus on the pendejos in your ranks, I'll work on finding more of Hisashi's connections. From what all I've seen, all he's doing is amassing money. He hasn't bought anything recently, so I don't think he's just in this for the money. Angel stayed silent as he began to gather up his own documents. Despite having worked against each other for so long, he had come to trust Tony and, grudgingly, like her. Who would have thought a scrawny kid would have turned him this soft? He would do anything for Izuku, and it was clear Tony felt the same. His hands were far from clean. Izuku and Tony both knew this. There was a reason why he was feared and respected by the New York underground and everyone surrounding. Murder, weapons deals, bribery. He was far from an innocent man, but he would do everything to help preserve the remaining innocence Izuku had. I don't know exact details, but I believe Hisashi is hoping to find information of some sort. Information? Has Izuku said anything about it? Tony finished packing everything away into her bag. The two of them had met at one of Angel's many apartments, one that no one in the Silver Phantoms knew about, only Mr. Purple. Angel shook his head. No. I don't really want to ask him, not since his last stunt. I know he wants to help, but he's too eager. Tony agreed easily. It was something she had noticed early on from her charge. He was a sweet and smart boy, but often blinded himself with his persistence. If he took the time, he was a tactical genius. His quirk analysis was top of the line. It was on par with, maybe even better than, Tony's parents who ran an analysis clinic. I don't know what exactly Izuku found, but he said he would need to take time to translate it. He may show it to you within the next few days. I don't have high hopes, but who knows? Angel opened the door, retrieving Mr. Purple from his watch post outside of the apartment. He would run through all of the information with his boyfriend later to discuss their next step. Once he finishes, send me copies of his translations. Tony pulled her boots back on, careful not to step on the plush carpet. I will, until next time. With a nodded farewell to Mr. Purple, Tony left to collect Izuku from school. Despite everything, Angel was confident everything would go well. Everything was not going well. Izuku had used a computer in his school's library to double, triple, and quadruple check his translations. Everything was correct. There were no silly mistakes caused by a missed slide in a kanji. The letters detailed his father's no. They detailed Hisashi's plans to give Izuku to some man in Japan in exchange for information and revenge. Information on his mother's death. Revenge against whoever called for her death. Nothing made sense. Every single puzzle piece was covered in sharp edges that refused to fit together regardless of how they were oriented. Something was missing and it was infuriating. Trigger. Money. Son. Jiren. Shigaraki. Mother. Revenge. Izuku knew that giving Tony and Angel what he knew was important. Maybe they could find something that he did see, something that he missed. If they couldn't figure it out, surely, they'd be able to keep him safe. Konohito? You ready to go? Izuku was pulled out of thoughts by Tony. She was standing a few feet away, where she always waited for him after school. Come on, Mijito, I found a new hero documentary you might like. Izuku shook off his worries and ran up to her, holding her hand. As the two of them walked away, he regaled her with what his day had entailed. The only outward sign that they were talking were Tony's muted snorts of laughter. It honestly must have looked strange considering neither were saying anything vocally. Neither cared, they'd long since gotten past the embarrassment of reacting to a conversation and joke that only they could hear. Have any homework? Izuku shook his head, his curls bouncing a bit as he did. Good, go get comfy. I'll grab us some snacks, Tony said and kissed his forehead. I'll be right out. She smiled softly as she watched Izuku run off. He practically dove onto the couch, pulling his favorite blanket out of the stack she kept within reach. Once she had 2 bowls of popcorn and 2 cups with soda, she walked out to meet him. She popped in the DVD and took her usual seat next to Izuku. He watched the TV with rapt attention, barely blinking for fear of missing something. Tony laughed softly at how excited he was and lightly carted her fingers through his hair. Time passed quickly as they ate their snacks and enjoyed the others' company. Izuku's excitement quickly began to fade and smolder as the documentary continued. He normally was enthralled by every second of something hero-related, even if he'd already seen it a million times. Aizu. Izuku looked up at her with a questioning look on his face. What's on your mind? Penny for your thoughts. He looked down at his lap before slowly reaching out and taking Tony's hand. I finished translating the letters I found in Hisashi's office. She straightened immediately, but her outward emotions didn't change. What did you find? Tony pulled him closer, already knowing from his disposition that it wouldn't be good. Izuku stood silently and padded over to his backpack. Zipping it open, he pulled out the notebook he used for his translation. He flipped through to the cleanest copies of the translations and handed it over to Tony. She began to read. And read. And read. And she did not like what saw. And you're sure this is exactly what the letters said? Angel flipped through the different pages. Never before had he looked so stressed. The normally well-put-together man appeared to be on the verge of tears. If so, this is so much worse than I thought. I went through everything at least 3 times. Angel bit the inside of his cheek and jerkily nodded his head. Right? His head sunk into his hands. I had hoped I wouldn't have to deal with Jiren again. Who exactly is he? Tony asked from her seat next to Mr. Purple. It was clear that Angel knew the man. He's a broker from Japan. Hisashi put me into contact with him a couple times for deals, but I quickly broke off all contracts. He's not the worst, but the company he keeps is a different story. Angel spoke as if every word pained him. Jiren keeps regular contact with a man of the last name Shigaraki. No one knows his first name, but he's often called All for One. Izuku glanced between Angel and Mr. Purple. Both of their faces betrayed their utter dread. Mr. Purple, the man Izuku thought had no fear, looked as if he had seen a ghost. This man, if he goes after you, you don't get out alive. He's a god in his own right. From what it looks like, Hisashi is hoping to pay All for One and give you to him in exchange for information about who killed your mother. I wouldn't be surprised if there was more to the deal as we only have the letters to Hisashi. Mr. Purple stood abruptly and began to gather the various files and thumb drives that held all of the evidence to take down Hisashi. We can't wait anymore. We need to take this to the police and get rid of Hisashi and the men that we know of. Tony, you need to take Izuku as far away as possible. He put everything into a bag and slung it over his shoulder. Tony nodded and quickly stood, pulling Izuku with her. What are you two going to do? I'll turn this in and give my testimony, hopefully it'll buy you three enough time to get away. Angel shook his head. No. If you're turning yourself in, I'm coming with you. If we're arrested together, people will think someone else is the snitch. Angel lowered himself to his knees and pulled Izuku into a tight hug. I love you, little one. Do as Tony says, remember your lessons and stay safe. Izuku teared up and clung to the man that was the closest thing to a dad he ever had. I will. Izuku didn't think the letters would change things so much. He didn't want Angel and Mr. Purple to go away. He didn't want to run away with Tony. He didn't want to leave the life he had, but he had no choice. Now go, grab what you need from your apartment. Angel reached into his desk and pulled out a manila envelope. This has money and the addresses for a couple safe houses I keep. Lay low. Tony nodded simply and shoved the envelope into her bag. She pulled the two men that she had come to trust into a tight hug. Gracias, mis amigos. She let them go abruptly and pulled Izuku out of the room quickly. Izuku jogged lightly to keep up. The trip home was a vague blur for Izuku. Every minute was filled with dread and fear for the future. The only other emotion he could easily identify was anger. Anger at his father for being unable to move past his mother's death. Anger at his father for betraying Angel and Mr. Purple. Anger at his father for selling him. Be quick, Konahito, we don't have long. Tony fumbled with the keys as she tried to unlock the door. She finally managed to slide the key into the lock. It clicked softly. She swung the door open and the two of them were met with a terrifying sight. Welcome home, Antonella. Hisashi smirked from his seat on the couch. 3 police officers were waiting at his side. That's her, officers. She's Spectrum, the vigilante you've been trying to catch. The officers stepped forward and cuffed her, not particularly gently. Tony's face was blank as it all happened. At that moment, she broke. She couldn't run. Running was an admission of guilt. When she was caught, not if, when there would be nothing she could say to prove her innocence. No, it was better to go quietly and try to bargain through good behavior. She would have a higher chance of seeing Izuku again. Izuku! I was so worried. Hisashi pulled Izuku into a hug. Izuku stiffened at his father's touch. I had no idea she was a vigilante. I can't believe such a violent villain has been tainting you. Hisashi pulled back enough to see his son's face. A single tear slipped down Izuku's cheek as Tony was led out. It's okay, my son, you're safe now. Excuse me, officers? I have something you'll be interested in. Angel had a confident facade up as he waltzed into the police station with Mr. Purple. He looked at the officers and detectives who had been after him for years, trying to pin a single crime on him long enough to lock him away. I promise this will be worth your time. Angel squeezed Mr. Purple's hand as they were led to an interrogation room. Both men had accepted what was to come. All they could do was hope that fate was merciful. The two men sat at the table and pulled out their files. Everything I'm giving you right now is enough evidence to arrest and sentence the leaders of the Silver Phantoms, their men, and some vital connections. I realize that all of this also proves my guilt as well as my bodyguard. I need you to act on this as soon as humanly possible, Angel said as he spread everything out. The detectives were skeptical at first, but quickly were drawn in by everything laid out in front of them. The freedom of the Silver Phantoms was granted to them on a silver platter. We appreciate the evidence, but why now? Something more important arose. Taking down these men, especially Hisashi Midoriya, is vital to keeping one special boy safe. Please don't disappoint. The head detective gave one last glance at the files before nodding. Send a team of officers to collect Hisashi Midoriya and everyone else on the list. For the first time all day, Angel relaxed. Every single hope that Izuku held of living a somewhat happy and stable life without his father was dashed. He should have known it was never meant to be. Hope was a facade made of paper mache and oil paints. Izuku simply stared down at his lap, making no indication that he heard either of them. He had initially been happy, very happy about the idea of his father being arrested. But then they took Tony. And then he saw Angel and Mr. Purple being taken away as they entered the precinct. Angel's eyes widened in abject terror when he saw Tony in H&S. Mr. Purple looked numb. They exchanged no words. "Kid?" an officer asked, squatting in front of Izuku. Izuku slowly looked up, his eyes filled with tears and rage. He always understood that Tony and Angel existed outside of the law. They had often joked about how the police would love to arrest them, but it was always a joke. It was never a possibility in any of their minds. Tony was too smart, and Angel was too wealthy. Angel gave himself up to give them a chance. Tony couldn't run away, not when Izuku was with her. A tempest raged behind Izuku's eyes, straining as hard as possible to break free. The papier-mâché was ripped in the winds and the oil paints were smeared by the torrential rains. Hope was a flimsy thing, only for the innocent and naive. Izuku was neither anymore. Tears landed on Izuku's lap, unchecked. Who was going to deny a child their right to cry? "Hey kid, no need to cry," the officer offered a shaky smile. "You'll be okay, we'll find you a good family to take care of you, I promise." An officer with pink hair swatted the back of his head. "Don't make promises you can't keep. We don't even know if he'll be able to stay in the country, he's not a citizen. It's up to social services." Japan. He hadn't been back to Japan since his mother's funeral. Japan was no more home than Hisashi's apartment was. Being sent back would offer him a fresh start, a clean slate for new trauma and heartbreak. He didn't want to go back home to Japan, but then again, America didn't offer much with Tony, Angel, and Mr. Purple being locked away. America had his dad. Japan had the men that wanted to buy him. The officers eventually coaxed him into one of the interrogation rooms, promising him that it was just so he could be somewhere quiet. He honestly didn't notice the difference. The main office was filled with the screaming of criminals and chatter of police. The interrogation room was echoing with his thoughts. "Izuku? I'm Mrs. Davis." Izuku was pulled from his sleep. He didn't even remember falling asleep. "I work for social services. I'm here to go over what's going to happen to you now, okay?" Izuku rubbed the sleep out of his eyes and slowly sat up. He nodded slowly, barely able to comprehend what was being said from how tired he was. "All right," she said as she took a seat and pulled out a packet, flipping through it carelessly. "Well, as you know, you're not a citizen. If you were a citizen, you could just be placed with a foster family and potentially adopted if the correct conditions arose. Because you're a Japanese citizen, there are a few more hoops we have to jump through. Just tell me what's going to happen." "Oh, I'm sorry." Mrs. Davis looked embarrassed. "I don't know sign language. Would you like to write it out?" Izuku waved his hand dismissively. He then motioned for her to continue. "I've been discussing with the Japanese embassy, and we've collectively decided that it would be best for you to return to Japan." He wasn't surprised in the slightest, but he still wasn't happy about it. "Your father will serve out his sentence here in the States, after which he will be promptly returned to Japan and barred from leaving the country again." She set down a pad of paper and a pen. "I get no say in this? As you are a minor, you don't." "Sorry." She didn't look sorry in the slightest. She just looked happy that he wouldn't be her problem for very long. "If you'll come with me, I'll be able to take you to the embassy." "Can I see Tony one last time?" "Tony? Who's Tony? I don't remember anyone by that name in your file." "Antonella Ramirez. She's my babysitter. I'll see what I can do, just give me one moment." She stood and left the room without a second of hesitation. Izuku was doubtful that she would let him see her. He was doubtful the police would let him see her. Tony was, in the eyes of the law, a criminal despite what any argument of morals would suggest. Izuku knew he wouldn't see her again anytime soon, but he could still hope. Even though the papier-mâché had long since lost its shape, long since lost its color. "I'm sorry," Mrs. Davis said as she walked back in. "You won't be able to see her. They've already transported her away to get ready for her trial." Izuku tilted his head back and looked up at the ceiling. The tiles were dirty and cracked. It was a wonder they didn't fall down and hit the heads of anyone that sat underneath. It would be so easy, so simple for them to fall, and yet they remained. He took in a slow breath. He had to grow up fast, that was a fact. Emotions were for children. People had to say goodbye all the time, this wasn't any different. But Tony didn't get to say goodbye. He was too mature to cry over this. He didn't get to see Angel or Mr. Purple one last time. He was fine. He was being sent back to Japan, that was supposed to be home, but he didn't know what home was. Izuku. He breathed out and swiveled his head to look at Mrs. Davis. I asked if you were ready to go? Was he ready? Asking if someone is ready to go is very open-ended if you think about it. In the physical sense, yes. He was ready to go. He didn't have many belongings, so it wouldn't take very long to pack. Izuku doubted they would let him bring anything that Tony gave him because it could be evidence. All he could do is pack his things from Hisashi's apartment. A single suitcase. All of his belongings, the ones that mattered, fit into a single suitcase. He didn't own one. It was some old, tattered thing that Mrs. Davis brought with her from her office. Izuku had never had a reason to own a suitcase, not after his mom died. New York was his home, for lack of better word. He had no reason to leave, as Hisashi was adamant against traveling for some reason. His life fit into a single suitcase. There were hardly any clothes that he truly liked that his father bought him. They were too dull, too strict. Tony bought him clothes in rainbows of colors, ones that added color to his somewhat monochrome looks. Angel was a little stricter when it came to clothing, but Izuku never minded. The clothes that Angel got for Izuku usually matched his own. While they may have been a bit more on the business side of fashion, they were still colorful, and any outfit could be accented with a whimsical tie. The clothes Hisashi bought him were purely for function and appearance. Monochromatic and crisp lines. Shirts had to be ironed and tucked in. Shoes had to be sleek and polished. No playing or roughhousing that would lead to wrinkles and tears. He wasn't allowed to take anything Tony got him. He had no way to get anything from his room at Angel's either, so he was left with whatever Hisashi had filled his drawers and closet with. Is that all you're taking? Are you sure you don't want to take more? Mrs. Davis looked through his closet without asking. She pulled out designer suits. Most of them were brands she didn't even know made clothing for children. Like these? These look nice. Izuku shook his head and motioned for her to return them to the closet. Those aren't comfortable. Besides, I have nowhere to wear them. I'm sure you'll have something fancy to go to in Japan. Do they wear suits in Japan? Or do they just wear those silly robe thingies? Izuku stared at her blankly. The only movement he made was slowly blinking. Mrs. Davis shifted awkwardly under his gaze. Did I say something wrong? Slow blink. Do they not wear robes anymore? Exhausted sigh. Was that racist? By silly robe thingies, I assume you mean yukata and kimono. Unless you're extra ignorant and mean the Chinese hanfu. They're still commonly worn, and the kimono is considered to be the national dress of Japan, so yes. That was racist. Mrs. Davis nodded jerkily before looking back down at the suits. So, is it still a no on these? Izuku wasn't sad as he boarded the plane to take him back to Japan. He didn't feel much of anything. The past week or so had been absolutely exhausting. Every day was filled with legal jargon and making plans about what would happen once he was in Japan. He expected most of those plans to fall apart one way or another. They always did. The person assigned to fly with him to Japan only spoke to him when necessary, which he appreciated. No words would placate his feelings about this. Words wouldn't bring Tony or Angel back. Or Mr. Purple. Izuku would never forget about Mr. Purple. Our seats are over here, said his nameless companion. Izuku was certain their names started with an A. He was sure there was a K in their name somewhere, but he wasn't sure if it was Ka, Ki, Ku, or Ko. Maybe it had more than one of those? Aki took the window seat. Izuku didn't particularly care. He was planning on sleeping through the flight, so Akemi could look out the window all they wanted. After clicking their own belt into place, Asuka leaned over and made sure that Izuku's was properly placed. Once Izuku was secure, they nodded and leaned back into their own space. The plane took off without issue, but Izuku was still fidgety. The sun was barely visible on the horizon, setting the sky afire with orange and pink hues. It was beautiful, but Izuku wasn't able to see it very well due to Akemi being in the window seat. Izuku didn't care, he really didn't. The plane eventually leveled out, gliding high up in the sky. He let his head roll back so it hit his seat. It was about as comfortable as could be expected, but he was exhausted. Izuku slowly fell asleep to the sound of chatter and roaring engines. Landing was nowhere near as pleasant. The wheels skidded across the runway, burning rubber as the pillow braked hard. Everyone jerked in their seats roughly. A few people began to grumble at the rough treatment, but most were just happy to be done with such a long flight. Akiho tapped Izuku's shoulder lightly. "Come on, let's go." They stood and grabbed their bag from the overhead storage. "From here, we just have to take a train." Izuku nodded and followed. He couldn't think of any more unisex A names that had AK sound. Give him a break. He followed A off of the plane. He lagged behind a bit, mostly from his shorter legs and from being exhausted physically and emotionally. The airport was crowded despite the hour. There were rivers of people crashing into each other and dispersing into every nook and cranny. Despite having lived in New York City for most of his life, he never got used to the crowds. Well, he did, but he didn't like them in the slightest. Crowds meant people brushing against him, which meant catching a glimpse of their thoughts. As one could expect, it could be very overwhelming. "Oh, I'm late." Izuku jerked back to break contact with a harried-looking businessman. Backing up just led to him bumping into more people with thoughts that were just as loud. "The Fanji kids, they need to be put on leashes, I swear to God." "Whoa, his hair makes him look like tiny grandpa. This is why I hate airports." Izuku felt a hand grab the back of his collar. He was pulled off to the side, out of danger of running into anyone else. He looked back and saw the mildly concerned face of A. "Let's stick to the sides, I don't want to lose you in the crowd." Izuku was grateful that A didn't ask or comment. Izuku simply nodded in return, eager to get out of the airport. A began to lead the way again. Despite having grown up speaking Japanese, it was strange to be somewhere where everyone spoke it. He was used to only hearing his father speak in Japanese. The only other time he heard it in person was at the Asian grocery store down the street from Hisashi's apartment. Despite being fluent in Japanese, he was hopeless at the menagerie of dialects that he was hearing now for the first time. "I know it's a bit overwhelming, you'll get used to it," A said as they led the way to baggage claim. Suitcases very slowly rolled around on a conveyor belt. Upon spotting their bags, A broke away to grab them. "Come on." They led the way outside where the air was crisp and cool. Izuku stuck close to A as they made their way down the street with their bags. As they had said, it was very overwhelming. He shrunk in on himself with every step they took. He wasn't sure where he should look, all he knew is that he didn't want to meet anyone's eyes. A scanned their way into a train station. Once there, they barely waited for 5 minutes before shuffling onto a far too crowded train car. There were no open seats, so the two of them stood, pressing close to the door. A grabbed onto the back of Izuku's shirt, just to help him keep balance as he couldn't quite reach the bar. The train ride was smooth, much smoother than anything he had ever experienced in New York. If it weren't so crowded, it could have been considered pleasant. He was pulled from his thoughts once they reached their desired stop. A led him from the car to a more residential-looking area. He had no idea what to expect, but he didn't really have high hopes. Izuku had been told that he was registered for school but hadn't been told where he was staying. Wonderful planning and communication, he truly loved bureaucracy. They eventually stopped in front of a large building. It was clearly on the older side but was well cared for. There were groups of children of all ages sitting and playing around the property. A few of them paused when they saw Izuku, but most just spared him a glance before going back to whatever they had been doing previously. Izuku didn't mind in the slightest. Once at the door, A knocked lightly. A voice called from the inside, but it was mostly unintelligible. The door slid open with a soft crash. "Hello. You must be Midoriya?" A smiled and nodded. "Yes, this is Izuku Midoriya. I'll be leaving him in your care." The eager woman nodded. She had a very kind smile and soft features. "I promise we'll take good care of him." She picked up Izuku's bag from where A had set it. "I'll help him get settled." I assume someone will come to check up on him in a week or so. I nodded. Correct. Perfect. The woman bent over a bit, so her face was a bit more level with Izuku's. Izuku took a step back for space, but she didn't seem fazed in the slightest. Hello Midoriya, it's a pleasure to meet you. Welcome to your new home. All things considered, it was a rather slow patrol. The most exciting thing that happened was a group of rabid journalists surrounding him and begging for some hot gossip. Please Mr. Mike, you must know some. Shoyuda had long since drilled it into his head that he couldn't arrest journalists that annoyed him because they aren't criminals Sashi. They're just annoying, not villains. What did he do instead? Just screeched. Just pretended that his speaker was acting up and had to get it fixed. The crowd was quick to disperse after that, most likely due to the painful sound. But hey, it got them to leave. So yeah, it was a slow patrol. Goth phase, what do you want for dinner? Theater nerd, surprise me. Goth phase, do you really trust me that? Goth phase, consider carefully. Theater nerd. Theater nerd, ramen. Usual place. Usual order. Goth phase, that's what I thought. Goth phase, house patrol? Theater nerd. Boring, I'll die from boredom. Goth phase, being bored is better than being busy with our job. Threader nerd, I hate how logical you are sometimes. Goth phase, sure. Focus on your patrol so you don't die. It may have been blunt, but Hisashi knew that his husband meant it with his entire heart. He didn't have to explicitly say, I love you, because Hisashi understood the undertones. He glanced down at his phone one more time before tucking it away. Those precious few seconds were more than enough for him to run into someone. A very small someone. A very small someone that fell. OSH. Hisashi put on his persona as quickly as possible and gave the poor kid he knocked over a smile. I'm so sorry, little listener. He crouched down so he wasn't towering over him. Let me help you up. The kid looked frazzled. His white curls were pointing out in various directions with no clear rhyme or reason. He slowly took the hero's hand and stood up. He remained silent. It was strange. Sure, present Mike might not have been top of the charts, but he was very well known and well loved. Any other person would have been fumbling over their words with either a thanks or an introduction. Hisashi made sure the kid was steady on his 2 feet before letting you. Again, sorry about that. What's your name? I could give you an autograph as an apology. The boy seemed to contemplate the questions for a few seconds before he started to sign, which explained his silence. I'm Bioyu. It was strange, he wasn't using JSL, but rather ASL. He was really lucky that Hisashi knew both forms. Would you prefer I sign or talk? Hisashi made his signs sharp and clear. It had been some time since he had used ASL, so he was a bit rusty. And in Japanese or English? I know ASL and JSL. The kid looked surprised, but pleasantly so if the small quirk of his lips was anything to go by. You can talk, but in English please. I'm still working on my Japanese. Hisashi nodded before picking up the conversation where they left off. Anyway, it's nice to meet you Bakugu, he said as he whipped out a paper and began to write a short, but sweet note. And there we go. He finished his signature with a flourish. He looked over the note one last time before handing it over. Bakugo looked confused. He looked at the note with a slight frown. He tucked it under his arm to free up his hands. Thank you. He looked at the note one more time, taking extra time to read the signature. Thank you, present Mike? Hisashi gave him a soft smile. Yup, that's me. I'm guessing you're new to Japan? Bakugo nodded. Well, I'm known as the voice hero, present Mike. My quirk is called voice and lets me talk and scream really loud. It also lets me use really high pitches. Hisashi watched in amusement as Bakugo's eyes brightened. It's really useful. I use this speaker around my neck to aim my attacks. Using it, I can create shock waves that can break glass or blow people away. That's so cool. If you don't mind me asking, what's your quirk? I can talk into people's minds if I'm touching them or something with their DNA. Bakugo wasn't lying per se, but he wasn't telling the full truth. To the normal civilian, they wouldn't have been able to notice his hesitation before describing his quirk. They wouldn't have been able to pick up on the little cues that one learns to look for when they're a hero. But Hizashi wouldn't ask about it. Bakugo was just some kid that he would never see again. Knowing the exact details about his quirk wasn't really important in the grand scheme of things. That's super cool and super useful. I bet you have fun using that with your friends. Bakugo nodded, which made him smile. Anyway, little listener, I've got to get back to patrol. I hope you have a good day, alright? Stay safe. Hizashi waved to Bakugo before walking off. Theater nerd, still a slow patrol. I met a cute kid though. Goth phase, is this your way of convincing me to adopt? Theater nerd, depends. Theater nerd, is it working? Goth is, no. Goth phase, was there something special about the kid? Theater nerd, nah, just cute. Theater nerd, he did have a cool quirk. He can talk in people's heads if he touches or their DNA. Goth phase, sounds useful. Did you get the kid's name? Theater nerd, I think he said it was Bakugo? Goth phase, hopefully Bakugo applies to UA in a couple years then. Theater nerd, that would be wild. Theater nerd, Titu, a guy just robbed an old lady in front of me. Unlike Hizashi's patrol, which was oh no slow and boring, Shuta's was the opposite. Without meaning to, he broke up 3 separate drag deals, which meant arresting the sellers and the buyers, all of whom thought they could run away. So here he was, chasing after the 3rd drag dealer of the night. How exciting! Why do they always try to run? It's illogical. I always catch them, Shoyuta mumbled under his breath as he ran along the rooftops. He had his eyes on his target. It would only be a couple more seconds before he was taken down. The drag dealer looked back at him before somehow running even faster. Well, he was running. He was now sprawled on the ground, groaning in pain from his hard fall. By the looks of it, he was apprehended via tripping by a kid. A scrawny kid wearing an oversized black hoodie. Unfortunately, the hood was up fully, so it was impossible to see his face. Even without being able to see any of his features, Shoyuta could tell that this kid was tiny and very young. Shoyuta squatted down next to the drag dealer and bound his wrists with zip ties. Thanks, kid, but you really shouldn't be out this late. The kid had the audacity to shrug. Shoyuta narrowed his eyes. What's your name? You're not in trouble, are you okay? Did he hurt you? I think I hurt my ankle when I tripped him, the kid signed simply. He then pointed to his hurt ankle. Alright, let me take a look, Shoyuta said as he shifted from his place next to the drag dealer to kneeling in front of the kid. He gently lifted up the pant leg to look at the kid's ankle. It was a bit pink from hitting the other man, but it wouldn't do anything worse than bruise. It looked fine. The kid eventually ripped out some of his hair. Ripped his hair out and took off, his hurt ankle apparently feeling all better. Wah kid! Shoyuta yelled after the kid as he ran. He rubbed at his scalp. Honestly, he's had weirder interactions, but this was definitely new. He'd only ever had his hair pulled by criminals. And Hizashi, but he doesn't count. But yeah, only ever criminals during a fight. That's a weird-looking kid. Shoyuta looked down at the dealer that decided to put in his opinion. Please? He's not selling drags like a certain someone. Hey man. All I gotta say is it's kinda weird he pulled out your hair. That's all. Shoyuta shook his head and pulled out his phone, calling the police. They were quick to dispatch someone to pick him up. Once he saw the flashing lights, he hauled the man to his feet and handed him over to the ready officers. There you go. I'll come in after my shift to do all of the paperwork. The officers nodded and herded the man into the back of their car. They drove away without exchanging any other words. Shoyuta was about to start his patrol again when something weird happened. Eraserhead. Shoyuta jolted at the sudden intrusion of his mind. There's a mugging happening 2 blocks from your current position. Take a left out of the alley you're in and go straight for 2 blocks. It'll be the alley directly next to the bar. Who the hell are you? The weird kid that pulled your hair. Shoyuta signed loudly through his nose. And what? You're gonna act as my guardian angel? I feel like guardian angels would lead you away from danger. I'm doing the opposite. Shoyuta wasn't sure how it was possible, but he could hear the amusement in the kid's mind voice. You might want to hurry. Shoyuta nodded, not that the kid could see that, or could he? He took off running where the kid had guided him. Sure enough, there was a group of men ganging up on a man that was obviously affluent. He was barely able to hold his briefcase out of their reach. He wouldn't have been able to hold them off for much longer. "I don't think that belongs to you," Shoyuta said as he sent out ends of his capture weapon. Considering the muggers had been relying on numbers over skill, they were rather quickly taken care of. He went from person to person, binding their wrists to keep them from causing any more trouble. He turned towards the affluent man. "You all right?" The man nodded his head quickly, now hugging his briefcase to his chest. "Why yes, thank you." Shoyuta dialed the police. "I'll wait here with you until the police arrive. They'll take your statement," he said simply. "You still their problem child?" "Not if you call me problem child." Shoyuta wasn't sure how the sarcasm was so perfectly portrayed. It was rather strange, but it was nice that he was still able to discern tone. "I have a lead for you once you finish with Mr. Briefcase. Just tell me now." "No." "Why not?" "Because it's something I have to physically show you," the problem child thought to him. "I'll give you directions." "Why should I trust you? I haven't given you a reason not to. Besides, my tip on the mugging was correct." Shoyuta didn't make it a habit of trusting people. Trusting people only led to disappointment and pain, at least, that's what experience had taught him. This may have been a kid which made him marginally more trustworthy than an adult, but he was still a vastly unknown variable. He would be proceeding with great caution. The only reason why he was giving the kid a chance was because his quirk could be useful, very useful, on the field. "Fine. If it's a bad tip, I'll track you down and drag you in by the ties of that ridiculous hoodie you're wearing." Problem child refused to deign a reply. Or maybe he was distracted by something, but Shuta's intuition said the kid was just giving him the silent treatment. He didn't mind in the slightest. He could play the silent game all night. Sadly, they didn't play for the entire night. The problem child broke his silence once the police were gone with the men in custody. Shoyuta wasn't sure how exactly the kid knew when the police were driving away, but he did. Maybe he was on top of some building? Somewhere he couldn't see the kid. Eraser head. Head north to the park. In the park, there's a fountain. I've left you a package there. You'll find all of the details you need there. Now, Shoyuta was willing to follow random kids into dark alleys, but even he wasn't about to open up a mysterious package. That was just asking to get anthraxed or bombed. Seeing as he had some sort of self-preservation, forced onto him by Hizashi, he made the smart call to request backup. "Hey Tsukachi? I have a mysterious package left by a kid. Says it's evidence for something, but I don't want to risk it." "Yeah, I think he's a new vigilante. No, he hasn't gotten physical at all, just guiding. Okay, see you soon." After hanging up, Shoyuta began to look around the park, never straying far from the package. He had hoped to find a trace of the kid, but there wasn't a single thing out of place. No sign of him at all. There was no doubt in his head that it was the same kid that Hizashi had seen earlier in the day, Bakugu or something. He made a mental note to look for a Bakugu that roughly fit the description. Soon enough, Tsukachi arrived with a small team, ready to investigate. Skipping pleasantries, 3 officers began to examine and scan the unassuming-looking box. Shoyuta jumped when the voice reappeared in his head. "I didn't trap the box." "Yeah, you need to build up more of a reputation before I take you for your word." "Fine, you're just wasting your own time." As Bakugu said, there was nothing malicious about the box. When they opened it, they were met by an intriguing collection of items. Namely, a journal, a gun, and a disposable camera. With careful hands, Shoyuta opened the journal and began to flip through the still crisp pages. The pages were still stiff, suggesting that the journal was new, very new. This fact contrasted with the fact that it was completely full, each page filled with ink. The handwriting was neat, save for some smudges of ink. "What's in the journal?" Shoyuta looked up from his reading. "Info. Info on that smuggling ring in town, the one we've been after." He handed over the journal with care. "The only thing I can fault the kid on is his lack of kanji. I'll have my men look into this, just to verify. I'll get back to you as soon as possible as to whether or not the info is good. I'll get the pictures developed while I'm at it." Shoyuta nodded once at the detective. Alright. Until then, I'll leave this in your hands. As he left, the officers were just beginning to bag and tag everything. There would certainly be plenty of paperwork for them to take care of, but that wasn't his problem. Did you really have to make fun of my writing? F-I-N-G hell. He really wouldn't get used to that. It's like getting yelled at by his conscientious, but his conscientious is more opinionated and quite distinctly hasn't gone through. PBR. Use kanji and I won't have anything to make fun of. I'm still working on it, give me a break. He snorted. He began to make his way down the dark street. Most citizens would avoid this area. The broken streetlights mixed with the sloping buildings made for an intimidating area, but he wasn't most citizens. The night air was cool and crisp, just barely pricking at his lungs and skin. So kid, what made you become a vigilante? Not a vigilante, I haven't used my quirk to stop criminals, only information gathering. Still illegal quirk usage. Technically vigilante. Nope, my quirk is always active, I can't shut it off. Therefore, I'm not at fault. I can't help the fact that my quirk happens to always be active when I run into criminals. He was gonna really like or really hate this kid. He was sure it would be the latter. You're such a problem child. Let's see where your intel gets us, then we'll see how this goes. Alright. See you tomorrow night, Mr. Eraserhead. Yeah, he could already tell he would hate this kid. Izuka dropped his bag onto his bed. He pulled his oversized hoodie off and hung it in his closet. It had been a rather long night, but he was used to it at this point. After moving in, it had only taken him a week to start going stir-crazy, leading to him beginning his nightly escapades. He knew that if Tony were here, she would greatly disapprove of him going out on his own to fight crime, so he strictly stuck to intel. He took care when pulling Present Mic's note out of his back pocket, unfolding it and hanging it over his desk. He made a mental note to look up Present Mike tomorrow. He looked at himself in the mirror, the moonlight filtering in the smudged window. His hair fell in messy ringlets. Dark circles were under his eyes, but that was nothing new. He rarely slept. Having been in Japan for 2 months, he was only just starting to fully adjust to the differences. The people were nice here, of course, but the language barrier left much to be desired. While he was technically fluent, he still struggled with the kanji and with dialects, which made it hard to build a rapport with his teachers and classmates. Only a few were comfortable with him using his quirk on them, the rest said it felt weird. Some said they were scared of him reading their minds. It was a solid fear as he was able to read minds, but only with fierce concentration and direct contact with the full body, not just their DNA. But as far as they knew, he could only talk to people in their minds. They had no reason to suspect anything, as he distinctly left out that fact when describing his quirk to them. He knew what happened when people found out his true abilities. Best to keep it a secret. Best for himself and for those around him. He wouldn't be taken away from home again, he wouldn't allow it. Couldn't allow it. All he could do as he lay in his bed was hope that the heroes in Japan were more observant, more proactive. He had been failed numerous times already, he wasn't sure what would happen if it happened again. Hello ma'am, is this by chance the Bakugo residency? A woman with spiky blonde hair stood in the open doorway, looking over the interesting duo before her. The blonde was more easily recognized. Aren't you that one radio hero? Pretense Mike, right? Pretense Mic's eye twitched. The dark-haired man next to him snorted and tried to muffle his laughter in a tangled mess of bandages. Scarves? Almost. It's Present Mike. Present Mike? The hell does that mean? I get the Mike part what with your screaming and all, but present. Present, like presentation. Every word the man said just confused Mitsuki more. What? PowerPoint presentation? That's fucking stupid. The dark-haired man looked like he was struggling to breath. He turned his back towards his partner, seemingly to hide the fact that he was laughing. He wasn't doing a very good job, as his shoulders were shaking and, PowerPoint presentation, Mike could hear his barely muffled laughter. Anyway, his eye twitched again. It was a bit unnerving as he was smiling throughout the entire exchange, never once dropping his star-worthy smile. We have a few questions for you. Would you mind answering them? Mitsuki looked over the men before shrugging. Why the hell not? I've got nothing better to do. What do you need to know? she said as she leaned heavily on the doorway. The dark-haired man, seeming to have calmed and composed himself, stepped forward. We were wondering if you have a son. Katsuki? The hell did that brat do now? We believe he was a witness to a mugging a few days ago. We just wanted to check in on him and ask him what he remembers. Could you please get him? Present Mike was back to normal, no longer twitching at being called the wrong name. Yeah. Gimme a sec, she said as she stepped back into the house. Katsuki, come here please. A faint stomping could be heard through the ceiling. The walls shook slightly as a rather grumpy-looking boy appeared. To say he inherited his looks from his mother would be an understatement. They were carbon copies of each other. The hell do why? He cut himself off as he took sight of the two men right outside of their front door. Mom, why is Present Mike and a hobo at our door? Said Hobo Man didn't even look offended. I should be asking you that, brat. Mitsuki said as she wrapped an arm around her son's shoulders, pulling him close. They wanted to talk to you. To start, what's your quirk? Katsuki raised an eyebrow. My quirk? The hell does that matter? He held out his hand and a few small explosions popped from his palm. I make explosions. Present Mike and the Hobo Man looked at each other before nodding. All right, the hobo said. Do you know anyone with a DNA-based mind quirk? Mitsuki spoke before her son could. My best friend's kid has a touch-based mind-reading quirk. I don't really know the specifics. What does he look like? Is there a way we could contact him? Katsuki scoffed and shoved his mother's arm off of his shoulders. Green hair, green eyes. He lives in America with his BSTRD of a father. Both heroes noticed how Mitsuki didn't correct her son's language. They also noticed how there was absolutely nothing connecting the teen in front of them to the white-haired boy that Mike had met, or the bratty vigilante Eraserhead had been seeing more and more often. Technically, the two men didn't know for certain that the boy they had met was one and the same, but based on quirk alone, it was a solid assumption. What exactly did you need Katsuki for? I thought you said he witnessed a mugging? The boy looked over at his mother, confusion etched into his scowl. A mugging? I never saw anything like that. Oh, Eraserhead and I both have run into a boy with a mental quirk. He witnessed a mugging a couple nights back and left before Eraserhead could question him properly. I had met him earlier in the day and he said his name was Bakugu. So you've been going to every Bakuga house in the city to try and find this kid? Mitsuki's voice revealed how ridiculous she thought the two men were. Not every house, only houses with children between the ages of 8 and 15. If you can't tell the difference between an 8-year-old and a 15-year-old, then we need new heroes guarding us, Katsuki said, all traces of the previous hero worship gone, at least mostly. In my defense, the kid is really scrawny. What about you, Hobo Man? What's your excuse? Not that I owe you an answer or anything, but he had his hood up and we were in a dark alley. I never saw his face, just his body structure. Mitsuki still wasn't fully sure the black-haired man was a hero. They said he was, and she should be able to trust PowerPoint presentation, Mike, but the man's wardrobe was not one that instilled confidence. He looked like he was wearing a once high-quality onesie that had since passed its point of being considered fashionable and dove headfirst into a bin of discount, lightly used bandages. Anyway, is that all? Hobo Man nodded his head once, not wasting a second or third. Yes, we're done here. Thank you for your cooperation. If you see or hear anything that could be the boy we described, please let us know. He handed Mitsuki a business card from one of his pockets. The card simply read, Erase Your Hero, Eraserhead, and a phone number. Very minimalistic. The two heroes turned and left the Bakuga house, the last one on their list. They had absolutely nothing. Izuku swung his legs as he gazed out over the city. It was nothing compared to New York, at least size-wise. The air here was at least palatable. The night was rather slow, meaning there hadn't been any villains, only small-time crimes. The underground, nighttime heroes in the area were still wary on receiving help from him, but some were beginning to warm up. Eraserhead, Ms. Joke. A mugging is currently happening in an alley. From your current position, you should be able to make it in under 2 minutes. Roger, kiddo. Ms. Joke replied, somehow projecting her thoughts in a sing-song fashion. She was one of the few that took to his help without much provocation. Tell Eraser I'll beat him there. Ms. Joke, you're right next to him. Tell him yourself. Anyway, run straight and take the first right. Run straight until the next intersection. Take a slight left and go down the second alley. Got it? Roger, Roger, you party pooper. Got that, Eraserhead? Yes. From his position, Izuku watched as the two heroes took off, following his directions perfectly. Watching Eraserhead tackle the mugger as he tried to run away was quite amusing. Hate to break it to you, Ms. Joke, but I think Eraserhead beat you. I don't like you anymore, kiddo. Izuku snorted to himself. Fine, I'll only act as Eraser's guardian angel then. He watched as the two heroes tied up the mugger, the police already on their way. The night was still young, relatively speaking. Living in the orphanage group home gave him a bit more freedom than he had expected. Curfew was at 11 for him, but they likely wouldn't get around to checking until midnight at least. All they would do is open the door and make sure every bed had a correctly sized lump on it, which Izuku took care of by carefully aligning his blankets and pillows just in case he didn't get back in time. Like you said last time, brat, you're not a guardian angel. Just a rather persistent and annoying voice that appears without warning or desire. Aoi, you make it seem like you don't like me. Izuku could hear Eraserhead roll his eyes. I would like you if you gave us your name. Bakugu. Nope, your real name. My name really is Bakugu. Izuku got the distinct feeling that Eraserhead would bash his head against the nearest wall if possible. David, I can't believe he has the audacity to lie to my face. Fing hell. Lucky he's useful. Eraserhead darling, I can hear you. Hey Ms. Joke? You can't hear him, but Eraser is swearing in my general direction in his head. I'll take care of him, sweetheart. Izuku squinted, doing his best to see what she would do. With the aid of his trusty binoculars, he was able to see Ms. Joke smack the side of the grumpy hero's head. Izuku huffed softly in amusement and smiled. Not wanting to distract himself for much longer, he swept his gaze through the streets, looking for anything that Ms. Joke and Eraserhead could intervene in. After much searching and ignoring Ms. Joke and Eraserhead's argumentative banter, something finally caught his eye. It's a bit far and I can't make out the details, but something is going on the south side down by the water tower. Got it, keep in contact, kid, Eraserhead said to Izuku, saluting vaguely in his direction. The two heroes finished handing over the criminal to the police and took off into the night, to where Izuku had seen the trouble. The night was mostly silent. His only company was the shadows cast by the moon. His only company was the whispers of nightmares brought to life. A slow night was never boring. Crime still happened on a slow night. They were just harder to find. They were behind closed doors, in alleys untouched by light, and in the underground where even the most seasoned hero would hesitate to enter. A slow night never lasts. Spectrum had taught Izuku well. He was always on edge once the sun went down. You can never rest when everyone has the potential to hurt you, to be your enemy. Spectrum would have been disappointed in him. Well, what do we have here? A voice asked behind the small boy. He whipped around to see who had just entered his perch. You wouldn't happen to be the little birdie that's been helping the heroes recently, have you? Izuku had been taught to fight in America, but he was a few months out of practice. They never delved deeper than self-defense, mostly because they didn't want him putting himself into harm's way. What? Not gonna say anything? The man in front of him was large to say the least. The scarcity of light only increased the unnerving aura being exuded. Izuku slowly shifted into a crouch, ready to dash at the smallest provocation. Well, a few of my buddies got taken in because of you. Only thing they could tell me is that they ran into a scrawny kid wearing a hoodie. Became harder to find you once you started hanging out on roofs instead of alleys, but not impossible. He began to creep closer. Izuku wanted to run, he would have run earlier, but there was only one way down and the man was currently blocking it. Normally, I'm not one for hurting kids, but you've caused more trouble than we can allow. The heroes do enough to us without your help. The man surged forward and grabbed the front of Izuku's hoodie, yanking him into the air. Izuku gripped the man's forearm, using his full strength to try and get him to let go. He kicked his legs out, trying to catch the man anywhere he was more sensitive. The man took it, only losing his breath for a second before moving his hands to Izuku's throat. Don't struggle, it'll only prolong the inevitable. Izuku's vision started to dim. Stop. Realities started to blur together. No. He felt something break. He felt something shift. Izuku screamed. There was no sound. The night was still as silent as could be, with only the faint thrum of humanity in the background. He screamed in the only way he could, by pushing every single thought he had, every noise he heard, every sight he saw, and the essence of every mind he had ever read into his attacker's head. Izuku heard a scream. He almost thought it was his own for a second, but then he realized that the hands were gone from his neck. His vision started to clear, ever so slightly. Before him was the man that had just attempted to kill him, screaming in anguish whilst holding his head in a crushing grip. Eraserhead. I need you. The man fell to his knees. His voice cracked, but yet he continued. What's wrong, kid? Where are you? Izuku took in a slow, shaky breath. Just follow the screaming. A silence had never been so loud before. So, do you want to explain why we have a tiny child passed out on our couch? Hisashi asked, his coffee mug paused right before his lips. Because I don't remember adopting, not that I would be opposed. Shoyuta sighed softly. This is the kid. You know, the kid that's been helping me and the others on patrol. The one that said his name was Bakugu? Shoyuta shrugged and took a long sip of his coffee. Take a look. Does it look like the kid you ran into? Said child was completely cocooned in a blanket with a hood obscuring his face. Hisashi stepped forward and lightly lifted the hood away to get a better look. He nodded once he saw all of his features. Yeah, he whispered. That's the kid. Did he tell you his name when you collected him? The erasure hero snorted. No, he didn't. He was too busy having a mental breakdown. Some villain found him last night while he was doing recon or some sheet. They fought, and now the villain is in a mental health ward under heavy sedation. He took a seat, leaning forward onto his knees. No idea what happened, but it wasn't anything good. Sheet. Hisashi took a step back. I think we're both gonna need a lot of coffee today. Why'd they let you take the kid with you? Shoyuta bit the inside of his cheek. It was a bit under the table. Hisashi raised an eyebrow. How under the table are we talking? Tsukachi made eye contact with me, and I just explained what had happened while climbing down the side of the building with the kid wrapped in my scarf to keep him hidden. I then pretended that I couldn't hear him as I walked quickly away. He finished off his coffee with an exaggerated sip. Hisashi broke composure, snorting and laughing. Oh my God, Shoyuta. I'm gonna get an earful from him today. That sounds like a you problem. It's an us problem because you're the one that brought a child here. Hisashi would deny in further conversations, but he jumped out of his skin and shattered quite a few glasses once he felt a small hand tug on his shirt. The kid was looking up at them both with wide eyes, his eyes rimmed red. He looked like an absolute mess, but that was to be expected. What wasn't expected were the dark bruises around his neck. Oh, sorry kiddo, how are you feeling? The fake Bakugu reached out to touch Hisashi's hand. Tired and sore. Where am I? I'll never get used to that, Hisashi whispered under his breath. You're at our house. I'm Present Mike and my husband is Eraserhead. He brought you here last night after you were attacked. He knelt down next to the couch so he was eye level with the kid. Do you think you could give us your real name? Because you don't look like a Bakugu. What are you gonna do with me? Do with you? Shoyuta took a seat at the opposite end of the couch. We want to help you. The other heroes and I appreciate your help, but it's not safe for you to be out and about, not like this. We can see once you get into UA. The kid's lips pinched together. His wide eyes almost seemed to search their souls. Izuku Midoriya. My name is Izuku Midoriya. He sat up fully, wrapping the blanket around his shoulders. He looked absolutely frail like that. I don't have a family, but I did know the Bakugas. They're the closest thing I have left. Izuku Midoriya. It was a fitting name. Have you been to see them at all? Shoyuda was giving the kid his full attention without being overbearing. Izuku shook his head. I don't know where they live. I left Japan when I was really young, I barely remember what they look like. He was clearly upset at that fact. He rubbed at his eyes, overwhelmed. Hisashi and Shoyuda shared a look. We can help you see them again if you like, kiddo. We have their address and they have my number. But we can figure that out later. First, let's get some breakfast into you and talk about where you've been staying. Mike, I want you to tell your husband that I hate him, and I have 3 stacks of paperwork with his name on it, Tsukachi said as Mike walked into the police station with a criminal in tow. Do you know what he did to me last night? Do you? Something about leaving you with a criminal on a roof? Tsukachi snorted. If only. He flipped me off and jumped off the side of the building with an unconscious child. I tried to get him to explain what had happened, but he just said, "What was that?" That sounds like the voice of someone that isn't able to use context clues. Sorry, don't have enough time to explain, I have more important things to do. President wasn't surprised in the slightest. He sighed deeply and pinched the bridge of his nose. I'm sorry for him, but you have to admit, it is kind of funny. Yeah, that's why I'm not pounding on your door to get him to do his paperwork. I'm waiting until at least noon. Present Mike nodded. Good man, good man. Sorry to dip so quickly, but can you handle this guy? I have an important lead to follow up on. Tsukachi took a hold of the man's arm with a nod. Get going. Just make sure your husband does his work. No promises. Present Mike yelled as his disappeared through the door. Alright, let's see, time to go talk to the Bakugas. Izuku looked at Eraserhead nervously. The hero had said that he wasn't going to force him back to the group home, but they would have to go back at some point, preferably sooner rather than later, if they wanted to help him. They were willing to bend rules to help, but they weren't willing to illegally house a child. Normally, I don't like flaunting my position as a hero to get special treatment, but it's warranted in this case, Eraserhead said. We just need to go there and collect your stuff. I've already called a social worker to start the process of transferring custody to Mike and I. He had been living with the hero couple for about 3 days now. He had been digging in his heels to keep them from going to the group home, but it was at the point where it couldn't be avoided. Present Mike had already discussed with the Bakugas about meeting up, but the 2 heroes were unwilling to do much more without having official custody over him. He didn't try to understand why legal mumbo-jumbo always went over his head. I think I'm ready, Izuku thought to Eraserhead. The hero nodded and lightly knocked on the door of the group home. They heard a voice call out from inside. One moment. I'll be right there. The woman in charge of the Hope opened the door, her hair in messy bun. How can I, Izuku? When did you leave? Izuku watched as Eraserhead's features shifted from his usual careful neutral to open disgust. Well, this conversation will be much easier than I originally anticipated. I'm pro-hero Eraserhead. My partner and I will be taking Izuku Midoriya into our care. His social worker should be around soon with he completed documents. He pushed his way inside, Izuku trailing close behind. I'll also be opening an investigation into this home considering you didn't notice that he's been gone for 3 days at least. The woman's eyes widened. Oh my, please, Eraserhead, you must understand. There's a lot of children here and it's hard to keep track of all of them. The children here are well taken care of, they're fed and given a clean place to sleep. The bare minimum. She bit her lip and shook her head. I can't help it if a troublemaker sneaks out behind my back. That's not on me, that's on him. Izuku, tell him that we've taken good care of you. Izuku shrugged weakly and stepped behind the hero. She never hurt us, but I've only ever interacted with her once or twice since moving in here. I also had to stop using my quirk because everyone was scared that I would read their minds or control them. Eraserhead nodded. He wasn't surprised in the slightest, not with what the kid's quirk was. I see. He told you? Told you that we're nice. The hero shook his head. Not quite. Just told me about the neglect and quirk discrimination. It's not discrimination, it's a precaution. We're packing up Izuku's things then leaving. Eraserhead placed a hand between Izuku's shoulder blades. Lead the way to your room, kid. We'll make this quick. Izuku nodded and led the way. He ignored the other children that gathered around. None of them had noticed that he was gone. It should have hurt, but he wasn't surprised. He missed Tony, Mr. Angel, and Mr. Purple so much. They would have noticed he was gone. They wouldn't have let any of this happen. He was mechanical as he packed up his meager belongings. He was careful as he folded every piece of clothing and packed every book. Eraserhead helped, passing him items as he stored them in one of his bags. Once they were finished, the hero hoisted the bags over his shoulder. "All right, let's go. I'll be making a few calls once we get home." Izuku followed him out. For the first time since coming to Japan, he felt that his life might be turning around for the better. Sure, Eraserhead and Present Mike weren't anything like Tony or Mr. Angel, but he was the closest thing he was gonna get all the way across the ocean. Eraserhead made a point to ignore the group homeworkers as they made their way to the car. Izuku had to hold back a laugh at how they all asked him not to report them. They truly weren't the worst, but they also weren't the best. The quirk discrimination hadn't been fun, it wasn't anything that he wasn't used to. Eraserhead stored the bags in the trunk, closing the door with a solid thunk. "All right, kid, climb in so we can head home." They both climbed into the car, buckling up. "Start thinking about what you want for dinner. We'll be ordering in because I can't be bothered with cooking right now." Izuku nodded. It was rather touching for Eraserhead to refer to his house as Izuku's home. It was nice. He hadn't expected anything to come from his semi-professional relationship with the hero, but he really didn't mind the evolution. It was nice to be protected, to be wanted. He lightly touched the bruises around his neck. "Yeah, it was really nice to be protected. You all probably aren't surprised by this, but I won't be updating this FIC any longer. I started writing this while I was neck-deep in college and stressed beyond belief. People have asked about updates and I get it. I promised I would update, but I simply can't anymore. If anyone would like to continue this story with their own ideas plot, go right ahead. I may come back to writing Nha in the future, but not this story. Thank you for reading and sorry again.